1 minute to live, 1 minute. And you're live in 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you're up.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Kincardine, 5 o'clock on the 1st of May, 2023. Roll call this evening. Deputy Mayor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Blackwell.
Present.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Present.
Councillor Hinchberger.
Present.
Councillor Kennedy.
Present.
Councillor Prenger.
Present.
Councillor Steinoff Gray.
Present.
Councillor Stewart.
Present.
I'd call on Councillor Prenger, please.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewa of Nawash Unceded First Nation and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation, whose ancestors were the first to inhabit, care for, and live on this land. We recognize and deeply appreciate the contributions that Indigenous peoples have made, both in caring for this land and shaping and strengthening this community, our province, and our country. As a public service organization, we are dedicated to learning and acknowledging Indigenous history and culture and are committed to actions that move us towards a journey of truth, healing, and reconciliation with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, the Métis Nation of Ontario, and the historic Métis Nation. Or sorry, historic Saugeen Métis, excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do any councillors have any amendments, additions, or deletions to or from the agenda? Once again, I'd remind you, if you have a pecuniary interest, to declare it now or as it arises during the council or committee of the whole meeting. Are there any registrants for public forum this evening? Seeing none. Minutes of the regular and special meetings of council. Clerk, please.
Moved by Andrea Clark, seconded by Rory Kavanaugh, that the minutes of the council meetings held on April 17th, 2023, April 24th, 2023, and April 26th, 2023 be adopted as printed.
Heard the motion. Is there any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Motions and notice of motion. Are there any notice of motions? We do have one motion here. Clerk, please, 7.2.
This is moved by Doug Kennedy, that council increase the approved budget for the Parks Master Plan from 25,000 to 55,000 for an expanded Parks and Recreation Master Plan with the funds to come from the contingency reserve, and that the scope of the project change to include municipal recreation facilities and programs with emphasis on future replacement of existing municipal recreation facilities.
Heard the motion. Is there any discussion? Oh, we need a seconder for that motion. Moved by Councillor Kennedy, second by Councillor Blackwell. Discussion. Councillor Kennedy, please.
Yeah, just to expand on my motion, it's to try to make a seamless transition from our Parks Master Plan that would give us a chance if when the high school especially decides where they're going to put their school, you know, to possibly buy lands near there for a new facility because of our aging facilities, and you know, after public engagement to see if the public agrees with that type of idea. You know, a double ice pad, a more family friendly pool, soccer fields, baseball fields, all in the same spot. You know, our job as counselors is try to make counselors in future years more comfortable in these chairs with good planning and open discussion with the public to see if that's something that they would like to do. Just, and I know I've talked to a couple other counselors that would maybe like to expand on, or discuss, the format that I brought forward. Okay, thank you.
Counselor Pranger.
Thank you through the chair. I actually fully support this motion. It's one of those, darn it, why didn't I think of that moments? I'm almost embarrassed that I didn't think of it earlier because it makes complete sense to me to consider your recreation and opportunities and programs and expansions in conjunction with parks. And yeah, again, surprised that I didn't even notice that I skipped over that idea. And I'm really grateful to Councillor Kennedy for bringing it up. Thank you.
Counselor Hinchberger and then Blackwell, please.
Thank you through you, Mayor. I had a discussion with Councillor Kennedy before the meeting, and I fully support the intent of what he's trying to achieve. But when I looked at this motion in the context of the Strategy Corp report that's in the package tonight, what it says about committees, terms of references for them, community engagement. I think about our asset management plan. Buildings and lands are a category within it. There's existing stuff in there related to maintaining existing levels of service to 2031 and financing for that. And then I also think about the in-progress studies and reports we've recently completed and what the outputs bidded them, as well as the standard that we were expecting from staff when they bring forward essentially what are capital projects to us in terms of justification with documentation, that I respectfully asked Councillor Kennedy if he would consider actually just deferring a vote on this motion to the next council meeting to allow a little bit more discussion based on the opinions that have been shared around this table. Thank you, Mayor.
Counselor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you, one of the reasons that I think that we need to engage in a broader plan is like for parks themselves. I think something that I talk about a lot is activating and programming for those spaces. And so considering all of our recreation at once. The other is that with the changes that we have coming down from the province around how we use development charges, essentially in our reserve for development, we have $180,000 around there. I'm not great at math, so it's not exactly, but that we need to at least allocate. And right now, if we don't have a plan, because we have to use 60% of our recreation development charges every year. If we don't have a plan, we're not going to use those effectively to either maintain what we have now or to consider how we can grow in the future. So I think it's important that we do. I'm comfortable deferring if that's what we need to do, but I'm happy to also vote on this tonight.
Counselor Stewart, please.
Thank you. Because, and through you, Chair, because there was no sort of backup to this, you're giving us this for the first time tonight, at least to me, Doug, or Councillor Kennedy. I agree with Mike. We might probably, or Councillor Hitchberger, we should probably delay this or defer it for at least a week that we can discuss it. One of the things is that we just finished strategic and we didn't put recreation as 1, 2, or 3. So all of a sudden we're bringing something more into this that we didn't do. And, part of our corporate governance is talking about committees and everything. And I think that Councillor Hitchberger was talking about maybe we should have a Park and Rec committee back up again to talk about this instead of us just sort of going, okay, here's another, $30,000 to do another study by some outside consultants that we really don't have anything behind it yet. And I'm not sure where the park study is right now. Is the park study already RFQ'd?
Director, please.
Thank you, and through you. I believe what Councillor Kennedy is requesting, that this will enhance the funds that council approved to enhance the Parks Master Plan that was completed and draft in 2018. So it was specifically for parks only. By considering Councillor Kennedy's request, it would also include recreation as part of that plan. And that's typically what you would see in most municipalities of this size, would be a combined parks and recreation master plan as opposed to a standalone parks plan.
Just a minute, we'll go back to Councillor Hinchberger. We'll come back to you, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you through you, Mayor. Just a couple of follow-ups. felt my own mind here. One had to do with terms of reference and the other had to do with community engagement. Key things for me, which were Strategy Corp was basically saying, if you're going to assign people to do something, you have to have very specific asks. And in this here, the ask is kind of a bit general for me, and I'd like it to be focused. The other part was about community engagement. I've only been on council about roughly 6 months from now, but generally what I've seen when we've looked at enlisted outside help, they do the best job to the best of their ability. But one standard thing is that we consider 5% community engagement to be an actual good thing. And I really have a lot of questions about whether an appropriate committee under the new committee structure that we're about to embark on could take more of a lead role with possibly some guidance from staff or an external consultant and could really drive community engagement to a point. Because the one thing I'm struggling with as a council member on almost every issue is trying to answer that basic fundamental question: what do the majority of the citizens in the municipality actually want? Thank you.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, again, I think it'd be prudent for us just to take another 7 days and take a look at this and everything else. We're going to go through corporate governance tonight and everything, and I want to take a look. I can support this, but I think we're premature and I think we're jumping ahead of the game. Another 7 days, I don't think is going to do one way or the other, but it'll allow us individually to ask more questions and to make sure that we're putting a plan together that we can actually move ahead on, because we have too many plans that are sitting on shelves collecting dust, and we have to be careful of that. So if you're willing to defer it for 7 days, I can support that. Thank you.
If I may interject just for a moment. From what I'm hearing, there's general agreement with the intent, but we have two options that seem to make sense where we're at. One is defer, which just means set it off and really get no more information other than what we find ourselves, or we can refer it to staff who can provide us with, numbers. Is that the actual number we need to include? Or from a staff perspective, through our CAO, is there staff capacity? Is there that process in place where the committee structure, because we haven't got it yet. We're heading that direction, but we haven't got it yet. So that's the challenge, Councillor, in that regard. But if I might suggest referring it to staff, and it won't be for 1 week because next week is a planning meeting. It would come back as a council thing in 2 weeks at the earliest. Because as you're commenting, there's a lot to this. Like when you have big intentions, it takes some big foundational work to get it set. So if I might offer an opinion, it would be to refer it to staff for them to bring a more fulsome report back so that we can answer the questions that Councillor Hinchberger and Stewart and Kennedy have provided. So that just be some guidance as we move forward. Councillor Kennedy, please.
Yeah, through the chair, like I don't have any problem with that at all, referring it for a couple of weeks, and that way all the councillors can get the information. The reason for me bringing this forward was to get the discussion going around the table. Planning is so important, and I'll use Wellesley as an example. 14.1 tax increase because they build a new facility, and we don't want to be in that spot 10 or 15 years down the road, for the taxpayers. So good planning can stop something like that from happening. Am I out of line speaking about that? No, that's okay.
Councillor Hinchberger.
Thank you through you, Mayor. I agree with your proposal. I didn't want to speak on behalf of staff and what their capacities are there, but what your recommendation is agreeable to me. And if you're looking for somebody to wordsmith a
Would you like
motion
to
in
make
that
a
regard.
motion to refer it to staff for a report to come back in?
I think it's a motion to amend, right? We got a motion
on the Okay.
floor. Motion to amend.
We're amending the motion.
I'm sorry.
Refer it to staff for 2 weeks. Flush it out a little more.
Motion to refer.
So the Councillor Kennedy has made a motion, and as part of a parliamentary procedure, you can offer a motion to refer it to staff. And I'm seeking guidance from our CAO. What is the appropriate amount of time, like that's, we can get some information in 2 weeks, but seriously, there's a bunch of work to be done here. So I'm not trying to slow it down. And the seed has been planted. Don't get me wrong. The seed has been planted. So I'm just going to ask for some guidance before we go there.
And I got the guidance and the nod from the Director of Community Services, and she would be able to provide a report that answers some of the questions that have been raised tonight in a couple of weeks' time.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. What I'm looking for is, I don't expect huge report, but maybe like what she's going to put on a request, for quote. So, we get a little more meat around the potatoes to see if we're going to go out and use an outside agency or a consultant. I just want to know what we're going to be asking and everything, because right now it's a little bit up in the air. Thank you.
So would you like to propose that motion to refer to staff to be brought back in a couple of weeks?
I would.
Well
Don't
said.
ask me to repeat it.
Well said, Councillor
Thanks.
Hinchberger. Is there a seconder for that motion, Councillor Kennedy? Any more discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
And that's carried. Thank you to Councillor Kennedy and our director. Well done. All right, we have a motion to move into committee of the whole. Clerk, please.
Moved by Beth Blackwell, seconded by Jennifer Pringer, that council move into committee of the whole and upon completion, return to council.
All in favor? And that's carried. All right, I'd like to call to order the committee of the whole meeting for the corporation at 5:15 on May 1st. Once again, roll call remains the same. Any additions, amendments, or deletions to this agenda from council? Once again, disclose pecuniary interest if it arises. And we have the adoption of the committee of the whole meetings. Clerk, please.
Moved by Mike Hinchberger, seconded by Rory Kavanaugh, that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting held April 17th, 2023 be adopted as printed.
All in favor?
Yes.
And that's carried. All right, we have 3 delegations with us this evening. I'm sure that our clerk has given you some guidelines as far as presentation times. We will be delighted to have our first delegation, Inspector Krista Miller from the Ontario Provincial Police Kincardine Detachment. Good evening, Inspector Miller. We are delighted to have you here. We look forward to hearing this presentation from your detachment.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council, for having me tonight. So what I am presenting to you tonight is your overview of your policing that was provided by the South Bruce Detachment for the year 2022. We're going to be covering some crime statistics, traffic statistics, calls for service, as well as some detachment updates. So starting with violent crime. Good news on the violent crime front initially. So there were no homicides in 2022 or other offenses that caused death, including attempted murder. Unfortunately, we did see an increase in our sexual assault reports in 2022. I don't really have an explanation for that increase, although I can tell you that 1/3 of those sexual assaults were domestic related. 20% of them were historically related, so reported to us a number of years after the fact. As well, we've seen a slight increase in our assaults. Again, almost 50% of those assaults were domestic related, unfortunately. And a bit of a concerning I don't know if it's so much of an increase, but 10% involved youth in our community. So that is something that we are monitoring. Abduction, that is, so when people think of abduction, they often think about somebody being abducted off the street. In this case, it is involved with domestic violence. So it is unlawful confinement, an unlawful confinement situation. As well with the robbery, and I think I received a question the last time I was here about the difference between robbery and theft. So a robbery basically is a theft that involves violence, and that was the case in this situation. So somebody was assaulted and their wallet and phone stolen at that time. Other crimes against a person, we have seen a slight decrease there, which really is good news because those are criminal harassment type occurrences, threatening occurrences, which are usually domestic violence related as well. Moving on to property crime. We did have 2 occurrences of arson in 2022. One is still under investigation. The other was minor in nature. We have seen an increase in our break and enters. Of note, most of those break and enters happened either to businesses or outbuildings. Also a slight increase in our theft over, and those are your larger ticket items. That's over $5,000. So usually involving a motor vehicle of some sort, whether that's an ATV, a motorcycle, a pickup truck. So that's what we're seeing in that case. Of good news, and that is also related to the have stolen goods, was the recovery of 8 kayaks from a local business, still with their packaging on them when we conducted a warrant throughout the year. So that is a good news story with the theft over. A very slight decrease in theft under, and really our theft unders are across the board. We have seen an increase in the theft of fuel, which isn't overly surprising, actually, given the price of fuel. Bikes, items from unlocked vehicles as well, and a bit of an odd trend, but some thefts of trail cameras as well. Also seeing a bit of a decrease in our frauds, which is always really good to see, as well as mischiefs in the area. Moving on to drug crime, just a slight increase in the possession charges. Those charges have come incident to arrest. So when an individual has been arrested for another offense, and incidents to the arrest, we do a search and the drugs have been found on the person at that time. You will see a fairly significant increase in the trafficking area. We have seen an increase in receiving information about possible trafficking in our area. For what reason, I don't know. But most of those are ongoing investigations because drug trafficking investigations do take a significant time frame to investigate. Most of the drugs that you will see that we are investigating in this area involve methamphetamine or cocaine. So with your clearance rates, violent crime, just almost a 1% difference in the clearance rate for violent crime. But property crime, we saw a 3.5 increase, and as small as that may seem, any increase that we see in solving property crime for us is a win. I often say to people, this is not CSI. We don't solve these things in an hour, unfortunately. So anytime we get an increase in solving property crime, we're pretty happy. And the drug crime has stayed status quo. Motor vehicle collisions. Unfortunately, tragically, we did have 3 fatal motor vehicle collisions in 2022 compared to just 1 the year before. We seen a slight decrease in our personal injury collisions, which is always good news. Personal injury usually involves speed. So as we know, we are always concerned about speed on our roadways. But we are seeing a significant increase in our property damage collisions. And again, don't really have an answer for that, except that possibly in 2022 was really our first full year back to normal, shall we say, increased traffic again in our area. I would say the majority of the calls for service that we see in motor vehicle collisions that involve property damage, number 1, weather related. Number 2, car versus deer, significant animal collisions. We see a lot of property damage collisions in parking lots. As well, I also noted as I was going through these, a lot of vehicles that were backed into, a lot of reverse collisions backed into on streets. And unfortunately, a lot of failed to remains where people are reporting damage to their vehicles located after the fact. Some further traffic statistics, and I won't go into all of these. If you have one specifically you want me to speak to, I'm just going to pull out the ones that are significant. You will note a significant increase in our ride programs. So although we haven't seen the increase here locally, Provincially, we have seen an unfortunate increase in impaired related fatalities. So the Ontario Provincial Police has a very big push on right now for ride enforcement. So you will see that reflected in the stats there. Impaired over 80, pretty much status quo for this area, although we would like to see those as zeros. Stunt driving, a slight increase in that area, as we are seeing speed, as we all know. And e-ticketing, you'll also see a significant increase in the e-ticketing. And that's because the e-ticketing software was introduced to our officers last year. It makes it much easier than writing out a ticket in a car. So you're seeing the benefit of that in the tickets that are being laid. Bit of a marine update. Almost 500 patrol hours were conducted last summer, 391 vessels checked. We were involved in one marine rescue, although that's not our mandate. If we are nearby and available, we will participate. 27 warnings were given and 1 charge, and we did conduct 1 approved alcohol screening device demand on a boat. So your school resource officer update. Mental health, and in 2023, you're going to see an increase in that mental health stat. This just at the end of this year, we started tracking the mental health calls for service that we were dealing with in the schools. Part of that is due to the MCERT program that we introduced in November, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. 3 assaults, 4 threats, 1 theft occurrence, 7 other criminal code, 21 trouble with youth, and then 200 other calls for service in the community. They presented 46 presentations in the schools and did 7 diversions away from criminal charges. So your total calls for service for 2022 are just over 2,200. That's the equivalent of 10,674 officer hours. I have an update now. I wasn't able to update that, but we're about 3,000 traffic stops for the year. That's for the entire detachment area, not just Kincardine. And just over 1,200 big 4 charges. So the big 4 charges are your impaired driving, distracted driving, seatbelt, and aggressive driving. So those aggressive driving behaviors that we all want to see curbed. And criminal code charges, just over 1,000 criminal code charges for the detachment. Now, I always like to do the your top 10 calls for service because when the first 3 slides are all criminal related. And as you'll see, if looking at this, not so much in your top 10. So motor vehicle collisions are your number 1. It is the number 1 in every municipality that the South Bruce Detachment polices. So that is not out of the norm. But your number 2 is false alarms. And that is something that we are working with the municipality with in regards to the possibility of a false alarm bylaw moving forward to help alleviate that and have some education and prevention in that category and bring that down. Suspicious people are 149. And property related, that is a little bit higher in this area. I do attribute that to the fact that you are a vacation destination. So a lot of that is lost property, found property, that sort of thing. So domestic disturbances. So the difference between domestic violence and domestic disturbances is that there aren't any criminal charges laid. So we will get called to a lot of domestic disturbances where there is not an allegation of a criminal offense, but it is still domestic, related as a domestic occurrence. Mental Health Act is 100, status quo from last year. Neighbor disputes and animal related are in your top 10, but we had a really great presentation by Andrew at our last Police Service Board meeting, and I understand you're going to hear from him next. So we're a little bit more educated about what bylaw is able to do in regards to animal complaints. So we'll be working a little more closely with them this summer so that we can bring those calls for service down for us. So your only criminal top 10 is your theft under, and that's number 9. And then you have family dispute with 71. So I was here a couple of weeks ago with the Community Safety and Wellbeing Planning Group. Every single one of the municipalities that I present to, and I present to 5 of them, their top 10 calls for service usually include 1 criminal code occurrence. The rest of it is related to, in some cases, social disorder. So you have your mental health, drug and alcohol addiction, that sort of thing that the community safety and well-being plan looks to address. So some detachment updates. And I know this seems a really long time ago, but we did expend quite a number of resources on the Freedom Convoys. We dedicated many hours to monitoring and responding to them, both locally, regionally, and provincially. We have a provincial liaison team that liaises with groups who organize protests such as this. So they worked with the organizers of the convoys, and they are all peaceful and safe and went off without a hitch in our area. We worked with the municipality of Kincardine and were able to obtain a victim support grant that carried on the work that we had done with the community safety and policing grant around human trafficking. So I want to give a big shout out to Jenna Lifeso. She is a rock star. We couldn't have done what we did really without her. She is an amazing resource for us and was very, very engaged with our officers in facilitating this grant. So some of the things we were able to be successful with the grant was we provided funding to the Women's House Serving Bruce and Gray for a victim counselor to support victims of human trafficking and intimate partner violence. We purchased audio voice recorders for our OPP members so that they could interview and support victims of human trafficking and intimate partner violence without having to bring them back to the detachment. We are currently working on a social media campaign and a billboard to create awareness about human trafficking, hoping that will go live at some point in 2023. We purchased promotional material and we're able to give those out at events like when we were at Sobeys, providing education to the public on human trafficking. In addition to that, we also hosted a community information session webinar about healthy relationships and consent to our community members. We purchased 3 docking stations for the local hospitals so that our officers, when they're in the hospital, are not just standing there basically twiddling their thumbs. They're able to access that information for the doctors that they may need and are better able to support victims by accessing it in timely fashion. As well, there were 2 laptops that were purchased to access training and community presentations for human trafficking and intimate partner violence. Also, our courts often are still virtual, so we're also taking advantage of those laptops for our virtual courts as well. We continue to work with the Mobile Mental Health and Addictions Response Team, MHEART, which are CMHA clinicians. They are based out of our Walkerton office, but they do cover all of our area, and they are a valuable resource when dealing with people with mental health and addiction services. But we also started a new partnership in November last year with Grey Bruce Health Services and Grey Bruce OPP. There was base provincial funding from MOH that was provided for the hiring of 3 mental health clinicians. And with that, we formed an MCERT team, Mobile Crisis Response Team. So we are extremely lucky to have Julie Robinson, who's a mental health nurse. She is assigned to South Bruce. She works out of our Kincardine office, although she does cover our whole catchment area. So she rides with an officer Monday to Friday, 10 to 6, attending any call for service in our detachment area that has a mental health or addictions component to it. Since the inception of that program at the end of November, she has attended over 80 calls for service with our officers. And I think since I added that stat, it's probably much more. 30 individuals have been diverted away from unnecessary emergency room visits and were provided appropriate care in the community, which is really our goal. One of the other projects that we did last year was we partnered with Perth County and Huron County. We recognize that traffic is one of the #1 concerns of our community members, specifically in the summer months. We also recognize that a large amount of that traffic comes up from the cities on our major highways coming through Huron and Perth County on the way to our lovely neck of the woods. So we put together a tri-county traffic team on the long weekends, and I won't go through all the stats there, but I think you'll note that the efforts that we put forward on those long weekends last summer were well worth the time and the officer resources that went into it. Of note, during those 4-week long weekends in the summertime, our detachment did not have a single personal injury collision. I'm going to talk a little bit about the warrants that we do, and these warrants are not in the Kincardine area, but as we know, the people who conduct crime in our area do not recognize borders. So the results of these warrants will benefit the community members here as well. So last winter, we had a number of enclosed trailer thefts across the area, not only in the South Bruce area, but in our surrounding counties, including Kincardine. So a multi-jurisdictional investigation was conducted, and search warrants were conducted at 3 residences, 2 in Huron County and 1 in Brant Township. We were able to recover 3 of those trailers, an RTV and an ATV, as well as drug trafficking paraphernalia, ecstasy, methamphetamine, and cocaine, and numerous firearms. 3 individuals from Brockton and 1 from Huron County were arrested and charged with multiple offenses. And the last time I checked, they were still in custody, which is always good news. On the 18th of May, we also conducted a search warrant as a result of a multi-jurisdictional investigation. And we seized 3 snow machines, 2 classic cars, a pickup truck, and 4 trailers. Almost $180,000 was recovered, and 1 male was arrested and charged with those offenses. A couple months later in June, we had an incident that started with the theft of gas, which we've seen an increase in, which turned into a fail to remain collision, and then an attempted robbery to steal another vehicle that led our officers to a property in South Bruce. We executed a warrant, and numerous stolen motor vehicles were recovered. Over $200,000 worth of property and approximately $25,000 worth of drugs was seized. 3 individuals arrested and charged accordingly. So some really great news there with those warrants. And just some staffing updates for you. We did welcome 4 new recruits in 2022. They all are living in the area and quite happy to be here and doing very well. We also had 2 experienced officers join us. One came from Waterloo Regional Police Service, local girl, Haley Allen, and one who transferred in from Highway Safety Division, Mississauga. In August, we wish Sergeant Dave Hackney a happy retirement. Some of you may be familiar with Dave. He served 22 years with us, policing with the OPP. And we also promoted 3 new sergeants in 2022. So Sergeant Tim Evans has been with us for a number of years now. But as I say, we like to poach from Huron County. So we promoted 2 of their constables, and they are working with us as our sergeants. So we look forward to their leadership moving forward. And that is my report. Yeah. Depending on questions.
Oh, thank you, Inspector Miller. I'm going to offer the first question to or comment to Councillor Kavanaugh. Perhaps you could identify who from our municipality sits on the Police Service Board with you. We appreciate your work there. And just the 2 civilian members would be good. Too many other names, but if you would, please, Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, the 3 members of the Police Services Board for Kincardine, our chair is Sandy Donald. And then along with Stelina Williams, who is our provincial appointed representative, and myself, who is the council representative, get to serve on that board. We've had some very interesting meetings and seen some in-depth information here. The two big things that have come forward for that really clearly are the false alarms issue and educating the public on the proper procedures regarding animals. And so staff has been working away at some of these things, and I'm really happy with the way things are going.
Any other questions? Deputy Mayor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Thank you, Inspector Miller. Very comprehensive report. I just wonder if I could take you back to the school resource officer update. A couple of points. Can you expand as to what is encompassed with trouble with youth?
Well, that can be a variety of things. Can include, without getting into specific details, it can include kids congregating in certain areas, outside businesses, that sort of thing, mischief, those types of calls for service. But generally, kids congregating being kids is usually what we get called about, that's categorized as trouble with youth.
So I just want to clarify, it's non-criminal more often than not.
Yes, yeah, it would be categorized under the other criminal HTA if it was criminal in nature.
If I could do a follow-up for a second. Also, you indicated the 7 diversions. Do you know how many of them outside of the diversions, how many of the callouts resulted in charges?
Of these investigations?
Yes,
No, but I can get you that information if you.
I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Counselor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you through your mayor, and thank you very much for coming tonight, Inspector. My question is about the violent crime slide under assault. You mentioned youth, and I was just to help me gain perspective. Are we talking about to what degree youth on youth assault, adult on youth assault? If you could just expand on that.
No, when I was going through the occurrences, what stood out to me was more youth on youth.
Okay.
Counselor Stewart, please.
Thank you. And through you, Chair. Inspector Miller, what would be the one thing that our community could do in 2023 to help the policing? I know you could probably say 5 or 6, but is there one thing that your officers come and say, if the community just did this, it would reduce our crime? Put her on the spot.
Lock your car, lock your garage.
Well, there's some very simple things to do. Please don't leave your keys in your ignition. Lock your truck, lock your cars. We could eliminate a lot of thefts by people. And I hate to put the onus back on the community, but there are some very simple things that our community can do to secure their property. When I'm out walking my dog, I couldn't tell you how many bikes I see out on people's lawns, right? And one of our top calls for theft are things like bikes. Most of our things like thefts are crimes of opportunity. So they're items that are easy to steal. A lot of times with the bikes, they may be stealing them to get somewhere else. Right. So securing your property, securing those items that you don't want to lose, and please lock your cars.
Just a question to wrap up here, Inspector, please. You commented about your marine work as well. Can you touch on the relationship that you have with our volunteers that man the MICES at the harbor, please?
Yep, certainly. I mean, Sergeant Hackney was our main Marine officer. He's been here for years. He had an excellent relationship with them, but our other Marine officers also are familiar with the volunteers with the MICES. They were actually engaged in a rescue attempt with us in 2020 and received an accolade from our organization in regards to their rescue efforts that night. So they, as I said, we do not have a rescue mandate that they do, but we will assist them if we are available, and they will often assist us if we're out on the water and require their assistance as well.
Okay, Inspector Miller, thank you so much for being here tonight to update us on the good work that the provincial police are doing, and we this is all in a good way. We hope we never see you back here at that podium again, because you have an important date coming up in the not too distant future, and we would like to congratulate you on your good service here in Kincardine.
Yes, thank you very much. June 16th, I am retiring, so I hope to be back as a private citizen paying attention, but you won't see me in this capacity. So thank you very much for all your support over the years.
You're very welcome. Thank you. All right, I'd like to invite Andrew James to come to the podium, please, for the delegation regarding James Special Services bylaw enforcement. Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight, Andrew.
Thank you for having me. Sorry, I just need to get myself sorted out here. Understand this thing. Okay, perfect. Okay, so evening council, thanks for having me. My name is Andrew. I am the managing director of James Special Services Inc. out of Owen Sound. We are your third-party bylaw enforcement and animal control contractor here in Kincardine. So just a little bit to get into it here. So just what we bring to the table. So again, we have uninterrupted service. We provide you with 365 days a year, 7-day-a-week service. All of our officers, we have a 24/7 call dispatch center in Owen Sound that fields calls from Kincardine on a regular basis. We offer cost certainty as well. So how we kind of ended up here, and just to touch on that a bit, in, I believe, 2021, I believe we were contacted to provide more of a seasonal support for Kincardine at their beach, dealing with various issues on the beach and as well as parking. Due to some staffing issues, we offered to take over the full-time aspect of it, and we've been here ever since. So when it comes to cost certainty, some of the things we offer in that sense are you pay a set rate, we cover everything else. So there's never an extra cost for things like training, uniforms, vehicles, fuel, insurance, all those things. So we bring all of that to the table, and we provide all those services at a flat rate. So all of our staff that work in your municipality and other customers that we service in the region all have police foundations experience or some form of ex-law enforcement or bylaw experience. Some of us have ex-military experience as well. So there's a variety of us involved in that, as well as animal control experience in dealing with various calls for service in that respect. So we're all use of force and canine controlled trained. So again, it's a very turnkey service that's provided to the municipality. We provide all of our in-house training. I myself am a use of force instructor, so I train my staff, and we also send them out for third-party stuff similar to, like, first aid, CPR, AED training, first responder stuff, because we are in the community on a regular basis. So if we do see something, we can assist where necessary. So a little bit on our investigative process and the steps involved. So generally, depending on the type of call for service, so if we can talk about property standards, for example, we generally receive those calls in writing. We like to have that in writing to kind of have a better picture from the person who is complaining to determine whether or not that complaint is malicious in nature, like a neighbor dispute, people just not liking each other, that sort of thing. And it helps us in the sense of going to court, if it ever goes to court, and having somebody to call upon for a witness. So step 2, we determine whether or not the complaint is valid. Some people will call and it will be out of scope. For example, like suspicious persons or things like this. Like, we get calls for all sorts of stuff. And the impact of the violation on both the complainant and the community as a whole will determine on how we attend that. And we also take general directives from council as well as staff. For submitting complaints, we ask certain parties to submit complaints through your website rather than through council specifically, and we can go into why that is later on down the road. And step 5 really is whether, if we decide to issue compliance notices or orders under your bylaws, depending on what it is that is going on here. So again, it's alleged violation, the impact and complaint on others, impact of violation on the community, and general directives. So these stats are from the 2021 period. You'll notice they're not exactly high because I believe we started in August as a full-time contractor, so we didn't have a whole lot of time to collect data. So 2022 will be more reflective of what we've experienced at that time. So in the 2021, we had 864 calls for service between August and December. Those varied. So I mean, as you can see, there's sorry, I don't have our slides printed out, so I'm trying to read off the screen here as well. So patrols can be categorized as things like parking enforcement. So in the wintertime, we do a lot of overnight parking for your snow removal bylaw that, you know, so vehicles parked on the roads, that sort of thing. In the summertime, we also do that for the beaches, and we do have your regular town officer that is accompanied by seasonal officers out on the beach doing parking enforcement as well. So you'll see the patrol times fluctuate depending on the time of year. Investigations are everything from property standards, noise complaints. It really has a very large variety of things that we will go out and investigate. Animal control is another one of them. Again, in 2021, this is not very reflective of the true volume of calls that we do get. But you'll notice that the investigations will also peak towards the end of the year. And this is generally us trying to clean up other things like property standards calls before the snow flies so that we can get them cleaned up so we don't have to revisit them in the spring. So this is more a full year kind of understanding of what we're looking at. So again, in January, February, you can see the patrol hours go up because we are out actively patrolling for snow removal. So a lot of this is overnight parking. Animal control as well. You'll see kind of decreases after the winter, and then we'll start to peak again in the summer and springtime. This is a normal trend that we have seen throughout all of our municipalities, but yours specifically does kind of go up and down as the months go along. And again, in the spring, the investigations skyrocket. So for 2022, we did have, so that was the hours of service was 2,083 hours. Now, I apologize. The hours for service for 2021 was 864, and the actual calls for service were 551 for 2021. So 2,083 hours for 2022, and investigations compiled, everything was 1,532 investigations that we undertook in 2022 alone. These numbers are also up to 2023. We only have up to March because April just ended, so I don't have last month's stats for you tonight. As we would be compiling those as of today. So hopefully we can get that to you in the next council meeting report that we send out every month. So you'll be able to see what happened there. So, but as of 2023, we're at 122 investigations and 514 service hours so far submitted. And you'll also see there's community assistance on this. So that can be from anything from fire officers are on patrol. We've come across accidents on the roadway, no emergency services whatsoever. So our officers will assist with traffic control while they're there waiting for emergency services. Other times we have been asked by EMS, who were the only ones on scene, to do that. In other cases, it may be nuisance animals calls like raccoons and things like this, or, you know, assisting OPP in various ways, or if they've called us and asked, we have in the past had OPP call us and say, hey, if one of your officers in the area, could they swing by and give us a hand, just with something to do with at the beach. I can get you the details on that if that is of any interest to you. This slide's kind of hard to read, so I apologize for that. There's actually in the police services board meeting, it was brought up that we kind of ran out of colors to put into this, but you can kind of get an idea in 2021 of the number of investigations by month, and you can see the different increases. So clean and clear yards is under your property standards and building code. So just so you're aware of that. Animal control, again, consistent through the summer, then dipping off in the fall. And we'll go over to, if you guys still want to have a look at that, we can here, but so noise complaints, we get some of those every now and then. In 2021, it wasn't so much. In 2022, it has increased. Again, that can be a number of different things that we've attended. So 2022 kind of gives you a more full picture of what we've been dealing with. So as you can see, clean and clear yards have increased significantly. Animal control and community service or other as well has also increased. And a lot of these are attributed, and the animal control and other are attributed to things like raccoons, foxes, coyotes, other forms of wildlife as well. Oh boy. So again, just by year, it kind of gives you a bit of a graph there. I apologize, my assistant made this, so just bear with me as I follow through with you as well. So again, other calls for service are in 2022 were 141. Clean and clear yards went over 200, or sorry, in 2022 went over 200 as well. And just in those 3 months of 2023, as of the date of this presentation in March, so we were looking at about in the 20s to 30 range of calls for those various categories. So, and these are the other categories. So like I said, public nuisances. So again, we do get stuff for like kids loitering. One of the most common ones we've received are kids skateboarding. I mean, in our opinion, they're kids. I'd rather them skateboard than be doing other things. Other things like public or drinking in public, panhandling, which we did have a few calls for on Highway 21 here as well that we attended. General inquiry, so people just calling about how to interpret various parts of the bylaws and things like this. Snow removal calls, so again, that's just for where snow was put that people didn't believe snow should belong. So we attended that to just kind of help out and pass it on to the appropriate department. Storage on municipal property, then things like cars and trailers, people park in the parking lot, leave their cars there for days or weeks at a time. Garbage calls, so illegal dumping or water ban calls. If you guys put a water ban in place, we do get called out for that every now and then. Not so much in 2022 that I can remember, but nonetheless, we got 14 wildlife complaints. So again, wildlife complaints are raccoons, foxes, coyotes. We've had them for rats and mice as well. It can be a number of things. Manure on the road and wildlife compensation. So we also do the investigations for that as well. So if a farmer has their livestock killed or injured by wildlife, we will go out, investigate, and take photos and complete the paperwork and submit that to OMAFRA for reimbursement to the farmer. Zoning calls we get a lot of as well, noxious weeds and fencing calls as well. So again, types of animal calls, so lost dogs, found dogs, wildlife, raccoons, skunks, birds. We get a lot of calls for birds in the summer. Seagulls or geese that are injured on the beach. We get I've seen fish calls that we get. I don't know what, sometimes I'm not really sure what we're supposed to do with them, but we will attend if we're in the area to just kind of assist the public in pointing them in the right direction. We do get kennel inquiries, so that can vary in scope between licensed kennels calling about certain things or people inquiring whether or not a kennel is licensed, or filing a complaint about a kennel they don't believe is licensed, which we will also attend. So dog menace or barking dogs. So barking dogs, we get a lot of dog menace calls. We have received a few from 2022. We are working on that. That one is actually, we will be going to the courts for that. And we're also working on another case that just came in today. Livestock at large. I think it's happened a few times. Cows get out on the roadway and we pull up on it, or someone calls us first. So we will attend to assist in traffic control and try and locate the farmer and get them back where they belong. So again, for dogs at large, it's one of our most common calls from Kincardine is animal control. By the way, these are actual dogs from Kincardine that are on there that we have picked up. So we receive the call, and generally we try and confirm with the person if this dog is secured. If the animal is secured, it makes it easier for us. We will attend, pick up that dog, attempt to locate the owner. We scan for a microchip if the dog has one. If they do, great. we'll attempt to get in touch with the owners. If they have a dog tag, even better. We can run it here through town hall. And we can get the dog home faster and then kind of work with education wise on how to, educate the owner on how to control their dog a little bit better and just give them an idea what the bylaw says, that sort of thing. So if we can't find the owner, we will take possession of it. And we will bring it at this point in time back to our facility where we will hold it for 72 hours and attempt from that point to locate the owner. And if we find the owner, generally we avoid provincial offense charges at that time. We try to give more education at the time. They will pay pound fees, and if they don't have dog tags, we will ask that they get those. And we get all their information, and that way, if we find this dog again, we know who owns it, so it's already set up, and we can go from there. And it would then proceed into provincial offenses. Wildlife concern calls. So again, we've got last year around this time, actually, we were inundated with calls for raccoons or skunks or animals just in sight that we were receiving primarily through about raccoons. So we generally receive the complaint. We determine if the wildlife is on public or private property. If a raccoon or a sick or injured wildlife is on private property, it is the responsibility of the homeowner to contact pest control or a trapper to deal with that animal. If it is on municipal property, our officers will attend, and the town has contracted a trapper to come out and handle that wildlife as well. No. And not in Kincardine, we haven't received any calls. We have in other municipalities that we deal with. We do receive calls for them. Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry. Did you have a question there?
Yeah, I'm not trying to diminish the importance of your role here.
Yep.
We really do have a significant agenda this evening.
Yeah.
So if there are really important points that you want to touch on before we're finished, but Councillor Steinoff, great, if you have a question, please.
I just had a quick question about wildlife, because I think one of the reasons a lot of people will call in is more of a concern of like distemper or like different issues, like perhaps potential rabies.
Yep.
So I'm curious what the homeowner would do in that situation, just to make sure that the proper testing happens, like even if you have to dispatch the pet, not the pet, but the animal that's obviously got something going on.
Yeah.
I'm just curious from a proactive perspective to stop the spread, what that is. Is that part of you guys?
So again, wildlife is not in our purview. We don't trap them. We don't remove them. We've had calls where people say, there's a raccoon, rolling around or making, weird noises or foaming at the mouth. Like, we always advise members that call in to, stay away from the animal. If you have pets or small children, keep them inside. And we will go the extra mile to try and suggest pest control companies for them to call, but we will not attend those calls specifically. We have had cases where residents have somehow removed animals that were sick onto municipal property so that it became a municipality problem. But those cases are rare, and we obviously don't recommend that people do that. And to your point, Mr. Mayor, this is very important that I wanted to get, because it does encompass a lot of the calls we get. So again, if it's on your property, we're more than willing to help direct you to where to go and who to call. But we also recommend you do not pick up or transport wildlife at any given time. It is an offense to do so. And we've had people that have done that and found themselves with either warnings from the Ministry of Natural Resources or others. So it is an offense to transport wildlife 1 kilometer from where it's found. So just so we know. So this is also very important. And after that, I'll just kind of go through and just see and pick out for you. So separation between setting enforcement of bylaws. So your role, again, we've had some issues in the past. So your role is to set the policy and provide general direction on what you want us to do. So we like to have a fair, consistent, equitable enforcement through everything we do. We do not want to seem like we are targeting specific people or not, right? So I mean, for counselors, so like if one of you decide to make a complaint, you're welcome to do so, and we respect that. We would ask that it be done individually and in writing, not as a whole council. And that is one thing that can kind of muddy the waters for you guys as well, as you know, are you really, in a sense, governing equally that way and fairly, right? Instead of, you know, working together on one specific property. So the other thing we don't do is we don't necessarily provide updates to complainants either about our investigation. So if you complain on your neighbor about what's going on there's no way I can fully determine whether or not you're doing that maliciously. So I'm not, when you call, I'm not going to say, yeah, we're going to this step or we're going to that step. It's always under investigation, and the results will always be seen whether the property has been cleaned up or the problem's been resolved. So we don't provide updates to anybody, just for privacy purposes. So again, who to contact, that sort of thing. There is sometimes a confusion there. So I noticed in Inspector Miller's presentation, this year in 2022, they had 85 calls for animals, and in 2021, there was none, or at least wasn't in the top 10. So for dogs, things like this, you contact by law enforcement, you know, fireworks, things like that. Disorderly conduct, generally that's kind of shared between us and the police, but we can assist as well. And just the names of some of your officers and administration that is involved in the process. Obviously, some of this is subject to change based on people's career desires and after working with us, but nonetheless, if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them as best as I can.
Thank you, Andrew. Very important function within our community. Deputy Mayor, you had a question, please.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Thank you for the presentation.
Yes.
I note that a lot of your work seems to be investigation. So just if you could take me through, for instance, if you receive a noise complaint, presumably you go and speak to the complainant to the matter and then the alleged offender. Where does it go from there? Do you make an assessment as to whether or not a noise bylaw has been infringed, or how does it go?
Yeah, so generally we don't just so if we're a noise complaint, just for example, we will obviously take the complaint over the phone from that complainant, get their information, where they live, what exactly was going on. An officer will attend if the violation is currently happening. Generally, as a first kind of attendance, we will say, hey, keep it down. Just if it's music or a party, hey, just try and keep it down based on your bylaw, right? If we have to come back, we might issue a fine in that sense, right? But we're not generally, we don't just go out and find them right away. We will make a determination whether or not it is actually happening. Like, we'll sit there and listen. So a lot of the noise complaints we get are barking dogs. That is the number one complaint we get all the time. And it's 9 times out of 10, we attend that call and we sit there for 15 minutes to half an hour. We don't hear anything. I mean, it could be a number of things. A dog was just let out and barking at something. I mean, dogs bark, it's a fact of life. But I mean, if it's consistent and we're there and we're always hearing it, we will obviously speak to the homeowner about that as well. Like, we do keep record of the calls and the addresses we attend and the people we speak to. So again, it varies on what actually is going on there. I hope that answers your question.
Councillor Kennedy, please.
Yes, through the chair, probably the biggest calls, the most calls I've gotten in the last few years is an animal maybe on the street that has a disease, there's something wrong with them that they're worried about. That isn't something that you deal with, correct? Each municipality has someone in their municipality that deals with those. Or the problem is for us to communicate with the resident of how they can get that animal removed and where they find the information to have that animal removed. I just think that's important for the public to know.
Sure.
Yep. So I'm actually, Councillor, I'm going to direct that towards our CAO, who has the answer for that question as well regarding municipal responsibility.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So I do think your presentation touched on this a little bit, Andrew, in terms of private property versus public property. So if there's an animal that is not a domestic animal, so it's wildlife, and someone's calling and they're concerned about it, if it's on their property, it is technically their responsibility to deal with that. If it's on our property, so if we have an animal that's diseased and is likely to die, then it lands on our roadway. That's our public works is most often going to deal with that. So if that's what you're referring to, that's how it would be dealt with.
Yeah, and just to add to that, like, we like most pest control companies in the area will deal with various forms of wildlife, whether it be raccoons or a fox or things like this. So I mean, we try, like I said, we try and go out of our way to provide numbers for those companies that are in the area that will service. I will say there aren't a lot. Now, I mean, one thing we've noticed recently, and not just in Kincardine, but in all the municipalities that we do cover in the area, is the wildlife calls specifically. And in talking to some people, I have found that it's a lot of, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but a lot of newcomers to the area are used to more animal control services that provide this as a service. Like, for example, Halton Region, the city of Toronto, all provide this service with their animal control. The part that's always missed is that there is still a fee associated with that. It's not free. They will use the SPCA to come out and deal with things like raccoons, foxes, things like this. We are not in the position right now to deal with that or handle those kinds of calls. I mean, if that's a direction council that chooses to go in the future, by all means, I'd be willing to sit down and discuss how that would look. But I mean, I think that's where a lot of the confusion on whose responsibility it would be comes from, is experiences from other regions.
Thank you, Andrew, for your presentation tonight. We are fortunate to have your team working in cooperation with us, and we look forward to another update next year when you come back to fill us in again. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you. All right. So I'd invite Chandra Tripathi and his extraordinary team to come forward to explain and invite to our multicultural celebration that's upcoming. Chandra, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Hello, bonjour, salam, ni hao, konnichiwa, ani, namaste. Thank you very much for giving us opportunity to speak few words about this great celebration, which we have been doing here in Kincardine from 2003. So I'm saying this is
Mr. Morris, turn your poster upside down.
20.
Thank you. There we go.
20th year. So 20 years in Kincardine, we have been doing this. And this is a unique in this Bruce County, at least in 2003. So I just want to say 3 words first. So the diversity is a law of nature. It's inevitable, whether it is in people or in the nature. The inclusivity comes from the mind. It's a law of land. We all have to follow. But belongingness, that has to come from the heart. So this celebration is for the belongingness. And that is why I started 30 years ago coming from India, but then 20 years ago coming from Toronto, and when we saw that we were missing in this area. So for our kids and the kids in the schools, we have started this. And we had a great support on this from our Bruce Power, like, because I was working there, I went to the board and Duncan was there and he likes it. So he had been supporting for all 20 years, and we got on and off support from municipality. I say on and off. So, but I had a great support now since I have Laurie. She came in a picture in one of the meeting when I organized the Hindu open house, and she was a great support. And I really appreciate her that we need those kind of people, because I have been working for 20 years, at least in the 4 different committees in the municipality every time, and the 12 years for the schools chairs and all these 3 schools. I have seen the public engagement is most difficult part, and that is where, and I saw these 2 presentations, a great presentation. I just want to link here that what municipality can get through this. This is not just a one culture. It's not Hindu, Muslim, Islam, or any other thing. This is a multicultural. Everyone is inclusive here. So what happens usually that all organization or the municipality or the government, they always say, you come to us. But when we are the small municipality, we can try certain things that we go to them. And this is the opportunity when we go to them. And all the problem, like what the second person was presenting, people don't know what it is. And I think if those kind of services can be given in this 2.5 hours, not only the culture, I always say the food, fun, and festivity, family and friend. This is the people who has attended, my friend Mike, who has been attending for many, many years, and with his little kids and my little kids also, because we were colleagues for 15 years in the environment department. People have good things about this celebration. So our team here is for two things. Number one is the support, whatever way you can do. One thing is being a part of that on the 16th of May. At least person as a delegate of this, or as an individual person of this Kincardine municipality, with your family and friends, because it's all inclusive. Everyone is a part of it. It's the Davidson Center. And since we haven't done last 3 years, because from 2003 until 19 we did, but because of COVID. So we are reinventing again, and not to that level what was in 2019, because we have around 1,400 people attended from 28 countries. But I will just tell you, this is even in this year, we have so far 25 booths. That includes 11 countries and then 11 other services booths. Now, with these words, so I'm just seeking your supports in all directions, like the finance, administrative support, maybe in future, the personal support, moral support. And if you believe on this, then all those kind of support, that the services come there and talk to the people in 2 hours. It's not a big time. Like the OPP come there and talk to the people, align with them, rather than just putting the statistics, what they can do. I think it's important. Like we always talk about the education. Like someone asked the question about the attitude, how we can change the attitude, how we can develop the behavior, because it's a community, we part of the community. I've been here for 22 years. This is my home. This is my children's home. So we have to make it better community. How we can do it? Involving, engaging. And we always say, everyone says in the committee that it is not, people are not coming. Why they are not coming? If they are from 30 different countries, they might have a different perspective to look at. We have to educate them. I think that is the part which easily we can do in the 2 hours when everyone is there and talking there, that opportunity. Second thing, we really want you to, if you believe on these things, recognize the committee or the people who has started. They were the leaders on this 20 years ago, when even in Owen Sound, this was not. I went to the Owen Sound to start their word after the Kincardine. So Kincardine is a leader. My Mr. Morris, where is he? He has been supporting for 15 years. So I will just let everyone speak 1 or 2 minutes. He's from the school. Then we have a principal from the school, the new, but she will tell that how good it is. Because I started from Huron Heights initially. We have a student, we always have in every year in the committee, some student. Previously, the Stephen, who is working now with our MP or MPs, he was a 10 years strong supporter. From Bruce Power, as I said, always the Kate is a member for this year committee, but we have a Jeff. I always spoke about the Laurie, and she will say about the municipality's involvement and engagement. And Laurie, you start that. What your reflection and experience a little bit.
Through you, Mayor, I'm not going to take very much time. I want to leave it for the committee. Just to say that the municipality, we have been supporting the work in behind and being the backbone to this fantastic event that's going to be happening. I'm hoping we see all of you there. Invite your family, your friends. And this is really important for us. It's one of our actions in our integrated strategy that you just approved around supporting, creating awareness around different cultures, different ethnicities, and then also moving to action. And so you're going to hear all kinds of really great things from the countries that are represented at the multicultural celebration. And again, this is a way to inspire action and improve inclusion, diversity, equity, and access in the community. So, and I just got to recognize Chandra for his leadership over, I think, is this your 18th year, Chandra? The work that he's done. And I know that we have been off and on again, but we are on again. So we're here to help out, support.
Sustainability.
Yes. Yes. Great.
Hi, I'm Sarah Slater. I'm the principal at KDSS. And I just want to tell you how important it is to support events like this in the community from the perspective of the school. our focus is diversity and equity. It has been a growing focus in our schools. And when I look at Kincardine and the growing diversity in my school in Kincardine, I'm reminded of how important it is that we not be isolated as a school doing this, but as a much larger community, as a part of the community. Having spent my 30+ years in education in small communities, Kincardine does stand out as being a community where there are events like this that make things more a part of the school. So kids see themselves represented, not just in the school, but outside in the community. So it's a very, very important event to support.
Hello, everyone. So first off, I'd just like to say how honored I am to be attending this meeting. My name is Pankti Shah. I'm a grade 12 student from KDSS, and I've been attending Multicultural Day since I was 3 or 4 years old with my parents. And as I grew older, I started doing cultural dances, volunteering at booths, and this is my first year being part of the executive team. So I just wanted to share a little bit about my experience being involved for this long. Definitely coming from a small community with less cultural diversity compared to other communities. As a little kid, I always felt a little embarrassed about the background and culture I come from. However, this annual event allowed many of my classmates, many of people within the community to attend and learn lots about different cultures and just learn about the cultures embedded within our community, which made me feel more proud about the culture I come from. And I definitely think Multicultural Day has made our school community very welcoming and inclusive, and as well as our local community. Thank you.
Great. I just want to drop a note to that point. You said it so well. This isn't just a one-day thing. I know it's a one-day event, but for it to be sustainable, then the rest of the school year and the rest of the year for the entire community needs to be thinking about inclusion and acceptance. And that's what we do. And I think that's what makes the school unique in contrast to many other ones in this province. And that's courtesy of what Chandra and his team have developed over the years. So this isn't just like one day, oh, we'll include and accept you, and then we'll go back to differences. No. And that's what this community should take pride in. But we have to continue to cultivate it because it's easy to lose. Okay, so thanks very much.
Thanks for the invite here today. So my name is Jeff Stephen. I am the Division Manager of Emergency and Protective Services at Bruce Power. In my day job, also I'm the chair of a subcommittee which is responsible for the corporate and social responsibility piece of our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. But I can tell you from my experience in emergency and protective services that we're always the strongest when we partner with our municipalities and with our volunteers on anything, whether it's responding to an emergency or whether it's coming together to make sure we've got an inclusive environment for our entire community. And so Bruce Power is very proud to sponsor this. Since 2003, we've been able to partner with strong leaders in the community in order to make sure that we can create an environment where we can have an experience where people can come together and feel part of the community the same as everyone else does. So it's going to be a great event where people can come together and they can share stories and share food and learn a little bit about everybody else that they're living beside, and learn more about how we all are similar, right? And celebrate our differences. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I will be happy, or we will be happy to answer any question. Otherwise, I say fun. Remember 5 things: fun, food, family, friends, and festivity. All at one place, and that is all free. Courtesy from Bruce Power and municipality this year, at least they also sponsor. And I requested Andrea, in front of all I'm saying, she's from Jamaica. And I take this opportunity when I see anyone, I don't say the different, but where the opportunity lies. It's not at once, but she can certainly present the Jamaica as a root, because the roots are important. The tree grows nicely when the roots are strong. Any question?
Thank you very much, Chandra, for that presentation. Any questions from the committee or from council? I will start with Deputy Mayor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Well done. Well done on taking the initiative to put together such an event and the committee as a whole. It's certainly something that I'm sure is welcomed here. It's a shame that it couldn't go over the last few years because of the pandemic, but it's great to see that the event is being hosted again. Well done.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I've never attended this. I feel ashamed not to, but I will attend this year.
Thank you. I just want to.
I don't know why I
request
didn't. Maybe I wasn't aware.
Hands up, who would like to attend by food?
Yeah.
And I will see really.
I do have a Lions meeting at 7, but I'll be there right at 5:30. Just one question.
Bring the Lions Club there.
Well, I'll
Everybody
ask
there.
them.
Food free.
Yeah, well, free food. They
Yeah.
always like free food. How about, did we invite the Indigenous folks to this?
We
Is
invite-
that part of that?
Everyone. Even we invite Mennonites, but they never come. We invite everyone.
No,
No,
they won't
we have,
come.
we have invited. I went personally, because they come to bring, like, I'm a big for maple syrup. They take the 16-liter, give to my kid. They come every year, and then I always tell them and give this flyer.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you through you, Mayor. Thank you for coming tonight. It's a rhetorical question for Chandra. Is there any limits to your capacity for community? And I've known you for about 20 years, and I think the answer is no. I really appreciate what you do, and please don't ever stop doing it.
No limit. I just want to have one, sometimes on Canada Day, we will have like 50 cultures dancing, doing all, and that's my dream for this Kincardine. And you all can help because you are the leader. You are the policy maker. We are here to help any way we can do it, where we can make this community better, stronger, whether it is in the area of environment or in the community or in education. And my
Councillor
free
Blackwell,
services are
please.
there. Free services 24/7.
Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you, through you. I remember the very first multicultural day celebration.
Thank you. Give her the first
Yeah.
one. She remember.
Yeah, I went to school actually with Varun.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
So Chandra's son. So I did really want to speak on the youth aspect, and especially as we're seeing more and more newcomers to our community. I think growing up with this in my community really expanded my understanding and my capacity to understand across different. So I'm really proud to come from a place that's done this for so many years, and I will be there, especially for the food.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy, please.
Yeah, just a quick thank you to the committee and Chandra for all the work this gentleman does, not just on this committee, but a lot of other committees around this municipality that he's put a stamp on, and everybody notices, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
I also would like to extend my appreciation, but it comes with a warning, because I had opportunity to celebrate with Chandra and his community at the Underwood Community Center late last fall, and my mouth has almost recovered since that time, almost. So I'm looking for some ice cream or something. I hope there's ice cream at the celebration. Yogurt. Anyway, so Mr. Morris, you have the last word.
Your Honor, I just want to add to it that Chandra mentioned environment, and he's used the word sustainability numerous times. This municipality was the leader of that at the Old Boys and Girls Reunion back in, I think, 2008 it was. And, Carol Blake's here tonight, making it environmentally sustainable. And that's something we're continuing with the company that supplies the biodegradable cups and serving utensils. So we'll continue that this year. So people who are attending know that we will be trying to keep it to a minimum in terms of waste and try to make it compostable. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, moving on to some council reports. I'd like to welcome from the County of Bruce. We have the Economic Development Guru, Jeff Loney, here. We have the Director of Planning, Claire Dodds, and we have our own Sherry Leslie, our Manager of Economic Development. Is that her title? That close? Okay. And Sherry and Jeff attended a significant conference in France recently, and they're here to give us an update, not only the update on the trip, but the outcomes that have been achieved because of that. So thank you very much, Sherry, for being here tonight.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and members of council, for having us.
I'm going to give just a quick update from the conference, and then I'm going to pass it over to Jeff to share the exciting news about some of the leads and the ongoing work that's coming out since the conference. So as Mayor mentioned, we were at the MIPIM conference in France in the middle of March. It's one of the largest real estate and development conferences in the world. It was an absolute pleasure to get the opportunity to attend that. And we were able to do so because the County of Bruce Economic Development Team had applied for a grant for some of the work around the clean energy frontier work that we are doing here in this region. And so with that, there was, I think in the report mentioned about 2,400 companies or developers that were at the conference, as well as over 24,000 people. It was almost overwhelming, the scale and magnitude of this conference. I've been to a lot of municipal and nuclear conferences in my career, and nothing was on the scale or realm of, of the MIPIM conference. We had a fairly specific focus, I would say, when we were in attendance there. We were really looking at attracting industrial developers to our region, specifically looking for some developers who would look at investing in the nuclear sector, lease space buildings for some of our industrial or nuclear supplier that are looking to expand in this area. So my focus was really around the Bruce Energy Center Park, you know, large pieces of property, large developers in this space. We did also do some work around the residential and commercial development, investment attraction as well. So Jeff's going to give some updates around some of the leads, but I'll just talk about a few quick takeaways that I had from the conference. Our story here of what we're doing in the clean energy sector and the nuclear sector is really quite remarkable, not just from a provincial perspective, where we have one of the lowest emissions for our electricity production in anywhere in the world. That's impressive, but just what's happening in terms of investment into our nuclear sector and the opportunities in our region with this. Like I said, even on a world international scale, it really tweaked people's interest. One of the takeaways is I would like to develop as a municipality some sort of investment attraction piece that kind of puts this story together really nicely in a package that we could share with people who are interested in developing in our area. And it would help as we're trying to bring more businesses into the community, in our business parks, in our highway commercial lands. It would be helpful to have something so that we could provide to them. Another takeaway was that housing is an issue internationally. I knew obviously it's a issue provincially and across the country, but we had countries across Europe, across the world, we're talking about housing affordability being a major issue. So just to, I know that's a big issue here in our municipality, but it's around the world. I was quite surprised with that. And we had a really good conference just interacting with some of the other Canadian cities and developers that were in attendance as well. We had one evening where we all got together for a dinner, and there was about 50-ish of us. So it was a good networking opportunity. And I think it is helpful or easier some ways to work on investment attraction within our own country, because there's less like money and interest rates, not interest rates. What's the word I'm talking about? Exchange rates and other things that are some limiting factors with some of the companies that bring in extra challenges. Anyway, from that, I'm going to pass it over to Jeff with some further updates.
Thank you, Sherry, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to the rest of council. You'll see attached in your package is a report that we recently presented to County Council that outlines a number of the different ways that we attracted leads while we were at this event. So we made contact with well over 200 people, which is small in the scheme of a 25,000 person conference, but those were meaningful connections that we made during our time. About 21 of those connections were interested in our area, more than just that place sounds cool. They were genuinely interested in that. And since that time, we've been working through qualifications of those leads. So a qualification of a lead process involves continually reaching out, ensuring they're still interested, and being able to scope that interest. At the time of the report to council, there were 12. I believe we're now at 13 of those leads have been qualified and have continued interest in our area, and some have acted a little bit more than others. So recently we had the opportunity to bring some developers from Quebec that we met at this show into the municipality of Kincardine and others to show them opportunities that existed. And we're going to continue to work with staff to see if any of those opportunities can come to fruition. Overall, the outcomes of this were a success from our perspective. It really did show the opportunity that Bruce County has and Kincardine on a global scale. We are bigger than just fighting for investment with our neighbors. With those in Ontario, we did and will compete on a global scale. With that, I just want to pass it to our Director of Planning and Development, Claire, who did attend with us and has a few final words to provide to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sherry, and thank you, Jeff, for the partnership and the collaboration and the work that we did in terms of the preparation for the MIPIM conference and the work that staff continue to do since. I just want to take a moment to show the county's appreciation for the support that you as Kincardine Council showed in terms of sharing Sherry with us and helping support her to join our delegation. Sherry's contributions were immense in terms of the conversations that we were having in the booths, having conversations with those who are interested in terms of future opportunities here. And I think really highlights and showcases the partnership and collaboration between the county and our municipal partners when we can collaborate at that kind of a global scale. So that wouldn't have happened without the support of this council table. And we're really grateful for that and the opportunities to continue on with strengthening that relationship. So thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening.
Claire, what municipality do you live in, by the way, roughly?
Well, I happen to live just slightly beyond the boundaries of
Oh,
Kincardine.
okay. You're excused then. Jeff, where do you live, Jeff? Help me out here.
I may live locally.
Locally, not remotely, locally, he said. Are there any questions, comments from council regarding this report? Councillor Stewart and then Kennedy, please.
Thank you very much. And through you, well done. Well done. We probably learned some lessons and everything else. And now that you have done an international package, can we take that same package and look at it provincially, nationally, and North American wide? I know you'll fine tune it, but if you have 12, 13 people interested, it'd be nice to take the same package on a county level right across the country and right across North America, because we could use some businesses, and what we really need is those tax dollars. But thank you.
Councillor Stewart, could you be a little less subtle about that? We want you to come, but there's only one reason. So. All right. Do you need to respond to that, Jeff, or shall I go to the next question? Councillor Kennedy, please.
Okay, through the chair, I think something that the Cherry said got my interest about a package that would help sell Kincardine, and that's why we sent you there, because we have the best place for those businesses to come to. So I'm wondering if you could tell us what we need to do and if there's interest around the table to be able to do that. Two questions.
I think the question is, what does the package look like?
Yeah.
What's the big picture here, Ms. Leslie, please?
I think we have our story that we were able to verbally share. We don't necessarily have something that's in writing put together nicely. And it's just a matter of pulling in some stats and some of the information that the NII is doing around the economic opportunities or economic investments with the nuclear sector in our region.
Just to add to that, one of the lines that caught me in the report was Kincardine, Bruce County has global value as far as investment goes, and many people in the international community were suddenly apprised of the opportunity that they didn't know was here before. So it's far beyond even though we agree with you, Councillor Kennedy, it's far beyond what we think it might be. Councillor Prenger, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I actually had the opportunity to talk to Sherry about this once before because we attended an economic development training seminar a few weeks ago together. And I brought up PREDC, the Penetangular Regional Economic Development Corporation. And PREDC in the past has actually issued a magazine called Sustain, and it was exactly for that purpose. It was for marketing municipalities and areas in the region internationally for investment. And I actually think it's a really good opportunity for you to partner with them to see if they could help or if you wanted to get some extra support for creating that package. I edited the initial copy of Sustain magazine and wrote one of the articles actually. And I read the whole thing. I was like, such a great project. And the intent for that project is exactly what you're doing. So I think there's some resources there that could be really helpful. So I guess that's my comment on that part. And it's just exciting for me to think about it because we have had international interest before. We've had investors from China interested for different reasons and what I won't get into details. But so I think there has been some small recognition, but I was so thrilled to hear about the success you had at this conference because it's taking it to the next level and it's wonderful. So good job, guys. And I had one follow-up question. It was something that Jeff talked about, but anyone could answer. How many of the 13 groups that you've vetted sort of are actually interested in Kincardine area specifically?
Every one of them.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, not an answer I can give, unfortunately. Most of them are generally interested in the area. I can speak to two specific leads who are further down the process. Both continue to be interested in Kincardine as well as a number of our other communities. I will say this was, and our booth displayed it. We led with the Canadian flag, not with the Bruce County flag. And still working with these leads, they recognize us as part of Ontario. So they're predominantly driven by property availability as opposed to individual municipalities at this point.
Sherry, Jeff, Claire, thanks for being here tonight. You have opened our eyes a little wider to some of the investment possibilities in Kincardine. Thank you very much for being here. All right, good evening. We've had a request for 5 minutes. If the judgment call is 4, we got a lot to do.
1 minute?
6:45, we'll be back at it again.
Hello, Chris, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. We're just adjusting your volume because you're really loud in here. So we're this
Okay.
is your
Don't mean to yell at folks.
Thank you. And did you hear we're just taking a few minutes break? It's not people just leaving because they don't want to see you.
Well, I've had that reaction before, but no, I did hear that we're going to have a few-minute break.
Okay.
Ready to go anytime you guys are.
Good.
Thank you, council and staff. You've been very prompt. So I'd like to welcome Chris Loretto to the meeting now. He is attending electronically. Chris and his team were instrumental in guiding us through our governance review, and they're going to be presenting the draft report tonight. I'd like to draw your attention to what the motion is. We're going to have it read so that we know this is a presentation regarding it, where it's our intent to receive the report, to address any questions to Chris regarding, whether that's what we thought, that's what we didn't think, have some of that conversation. But we have no intention of passing the governance review structure this evening. It will be referred to staff. The intent of the motion is to refer it back to staff after we've had the conversation, time to consider it, how does it affect our council, those sorts of things. And when our CAO and the team bring it back for final consideration, we will have the opportunity to adopt it at that time. So Chris, good evening. We are delighted to have you on board with us, and I offer you the floor at this point.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. It's great to be back with you. And as His Worship said, the purpose of tonight's presentation is to really walk you through what our draft recommendations are for the purposes of getting your feedback and for us making adjustments and or clarifying things based on the feedback that we get from council. As you recall, when we presented the current state 6 or 8 weeks ago, now we promised that we would come back with something that wasn't a fait accompli, but something that was fairly well thought out in order to get your input and to take that input to finalize our recommendations to you. And the purpose in that is really, at the end of the day, you as governors of the organization, working with the senior management team, the things that we propose have to be things that you feel comfortable and confident in, think are the right things to be doing, because it'll be incumbent on you to make sure those things happen, and that you're maximizing the quality of discussion and decision making that you get out of the governance structure for the municipality. And so when we last saw you, we took you through what we saw as some of our findings, which included where we saw areas of strength and where we saw opportunities for improvement. And after we had feedback from council, we took it away and began to think about recommendations in order to address those gaps and further build out those strengths. And so we started with a set of design principles, which are presented on the slide here, to really guide us in terms of coming up with recommendations we believe will be helpful to you and useful in maximizing the quality and the effectiveness of your governance structure. One is to ensure we come up with recommendations that help to use governance to focus in on priorities and set priorities and to govern against priorities. The second is to ensure that there is always an efficient use of resources. The council and staff time is a scarce commodity. And so what can we do from a structural perspective to make sure that we're always getting the highest and best use of your time to support the kinds of discussion and debate and quality decision-making that is needed to do the very best for the residents of Kincardine. Also making sure that, in the structure that there's an added level of transparency. And when we say transparency, not just the ability to see in and understand how things, but it is also, is it user friendly? People who participate in the governance process, whether you are on the council table or senior management or folks that join your committees, is the process understandable? Does it make sense? Again, does it make the best use of their time, skills, and talents to advance Kincardine? Also want to make sure that we're building in recommendations that make the structure more collaborative and ensures that there is the type of collaboration needed to get to the kinds of decisions and support for decisions needed to advance the interests of the municipality, and also building in continuous improvement, knowing that governance is not a destination, governance is a journey, and there's an evolution to what good governance is, and making sure that we're providing you with recommendations that allows you to continuously improve in your roles, both individually and collectively, with respect to governance. And so in terms of the draft recommendations that we're bringing forward to you, I think they can be simply put in kind of in 3 buckets. One is we have a series of recommendations that look to streamline the council meetings and the governance structure in general. That, eliminating committee of the whole, making better use of council meetings, providing more time for council and staff to prepare materials, review materials, ask questions about material, and share information in order to support decision-making around the council table. Looking at continued improvement and continuous evolution through continuing council education and relationship building, and helping to continue to build the relationship between council and staff and focus on professional development opportunities. That includes council as well, because it is a very important job that you undertake around that table. And it's important that you're armed with the latest information, evidence, and research and best practices to do that job. And lastly, it's about increasing public transparency. And again, making things easier to understand and easier to participate in. And that means increasing transparency with the public around committees, how they're used, what their purpose is, how you become a member of a committee, and how you can apply to become a member of a committee as well. In terms of, as you'll recall from the current state report, we looked at things in terms of key operating areas, governance, strategy, and a number of others. And so we've structured our recommendations along these lines as well. I know you've had the benefit of looking at the full report, so I'm not going to go into each and every one of these recommendations because I'd like to save as much time as possible for discussion and to get your feedback. But with respect to the kind of the first layer around governance, which is around strategic directions, our recommendations are really focused in on ensuring that council, and working with senior staff, prioritize clear and focused priorities for the upcoming year, and then instituting a strategic planning process, which sets out priorities for the term of council, so that governance can be focused in on managing against that strategy and ensuring that the governance apparatus itself is actually being used in a way to advance the initiatives and activities that council has deemed to be strategically important to advancing the interests of the municipality. And so that is what our main recommendations here around strategic direction set out. We're also recommending that you amend your procedural bylaw in order to enable this strategic planning, and also being very clear about the role that committees set up by council will play in supporting the organization achieve its strategic priorities. That includes council, through the procedural bylaw, establishing a set of criteria that you'll use to decide whether or not establishing committees makes sense, and if so, having a very clear articulation of what that committee is going to do, what questions it's going to answer, how it links back to the strategic plan with a very clear terms of reference that gives the group that you're putting together direction in terms of the advice that you're expecting them to come back with to council. And also clarifying the role that individual councillors will play on those committees. I think it's fair to say at the heart of our recommendation around committees is moving more to an ad hoc advisory committee structure, where you're actually setting up committees outside of those that you statutorily must have, that are really geared towards advancing priorities as established by council. And so ensuring that you're then making the highest and best use of the governance structure to actually advance those things that you believe are strategically important to the organization and advancing the interest of residents and taxpayers. The next layer that we looked at was around the administration of governance itself. And the way we would boil down the recommendations that we've set here is that we really want to simplify the process around council meetings. That's why we're recommending removing committee of the whole and better managing the agenda and structuring the agenda of council meetings. Having 2 of those a month and creating more time and space between council meetings, particularly when agendas come out and when council meetings actually have, so that there is more time for councillors to review their package. There's also time before council meetings to ask questions of clarification, and we outline a process for ensuring that happens and making sure that everybody is able to participate, even if you don't ask a question, able to participate in that question and getting the response back. We think that will help not only councillors make decisions around the council table, but it also actually, I think, result in a better quality discussion at the council table as folks have the main fact based under their belt, and you can really focus in on the nub of the issue and getting to the right decisions on behalf of your residents. And so we're also saying too that in terms of council agenda, if we're moving away from committee of the whole, we're going to use ad hoc committees to deal with specific priority items as we go through. That we're going to continue to encourage the CAO and the mayor as head of council to sit down and as part of their regular get-togethers, looking at upcoming council agendas, planning around those, forecasting out when things are going to come to council. This is not meant to say other members of council can't input into that process. You remain vital in terms of inputting into that process, but this is just more about better agenda management and making sure that you are creating time and space in your agendas to consider those things that you have to in making decisions, and that nobody's feeling under the gun or feeling ill-informed in terms of being able to exercise your responsibility as councillors for making decisions on behalf of the municipality. We also looked at public engagement in terms of the operating model for governance. And so our recommendations around public engagement really is about enhancing the effectiveness of committees by moving to the ad hoc structure, increasing transparency with the public in terms of how you apply to put your name in the hat, having more rigor around what we're able to solicit from people who are interested in serving committees in terms of their skills, competencies, capabilities, knowledge, and experience that they bring, and matching that to committee work, clearly outlining then how the striking committee goes about establishing who gets to sit on what committees, being very clear about what the committees are going to do, including that they are to provide advice, and having clear timelines around their work so that their advice is coming in a timely fashion, again, to advance the strategic priorities in the municipality. And also as well, we recommend that councillors serve as chairs, non-voting chairs, to guide and be that, interlocutor between council and the committee, but supporting chairs with training around how to be chairs, because it's a real skill and talent in order to harness the best out of the individuals who are sitting around a committee table and providing the best possible well-informed advice to council on the things that they're looking to have committees help them problem solve and support decision making. And we're also encouraging in terms of making sure that there is a diversity of candidates to consider for the various committees that you may establish from time to time, that you use a broader range of outreach strategies, some of which we've articulated in the report itself, and sharing information as committees are getting started up and as committees are doing their work through user-friendly channels, and also making sure that everybody who's involved in the governance structure, including those serving around the committee tables, are aware of what the communications protocols are around the work that they're doing, and how you use social media and other avenues to communicate, or in some cases not communicate, based on the work that you're doing as a collective, as opposed to as individual councillors or members of committees. The last piece that we focused in on was a layer around continuous improvement. And this is really just about ensuring that council and others involved in the governance structure have the professional development training information they need to be effective in their roles within that governance structure. And so we are making recommendations around providing more support to council by redesigning the onboarding process. The staff, to their credit, did a lot of hard work, put a lot of great material together to onboard many new councillors and returning councillors this time around. But we think that it could benefit from looking at the end users' experience with those materials, and really helping to design an onboarding process and a regular refresh around those onboarding issues and materials that will ensure that those things never get too distant, that we're always aware of, what our roles and responsibilities are, how we're to conduct those, how we're to engage with each other, how we're to engage with staff, how we're to engage with the public. And we're also making some recommendations, some of which are a little bit more bold than others, around more formal performance management processes, in terms of just really assessing how you're doing against the plans and priorities that you set for each other. and being able to hold each other accountable to that and reflect and adjust priorities as may be required from time to time as well. So I'll stop there just in terms of next steps, getting your feedback and updating the recommendations and the thinking and maybe changing some of them based on the feedback. Because we really want to understand if these things make sense to you. You think it would make life better as a governor and make the governance structure more efficient, more effective, and have greater impact in terms of what it is you're trying to achieve. And then we'll come back with a final set of recommendations, including some updated policies, particularly the procedural bylaw, an updated procedural bylaw, and some exemplar terms of references for some of the committees, the standing or the statutory committees that exist now, so you can see some of these recommendations in action for your review and approval. So, Your Worship, I'll stop there and I'll stop sharing my screen, and we're happy to answer any questions from members of council.
Chris, you should be sitting in my spot, looking at the faces of our councillors. The intensity that is, like, there's intense concentration on what has just been reported here. So thank you for this report. I'm going to offer the opportunity for council to question or wonder or whatever. And I'm going to start with our deputy mayor. If you have a comment, question, Deputy Mayor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Thank you for the review and the report. It's been quite comprehensive. There's many aspects that I think will help to, if adopted, help us generally as a council. So for the purposes of the motion today and being very conscious about the motion itself, I'm happy to support that.
Questions, comments? Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, just, I'm a little concerned about the committees and maybe just making sure I understand it properly. You know, it's May 1st, and we haven't had any committees meeting or anything this year with all kinds of different things going on. So, you know, I guess I'm a little concerned about timelines. I'm not concerned about ad hoc committees or working groups or anything like that. Just if I used an example, if it was a recreation committee and they were designated to for one job, you know what I mean, and that committee was together and they found out that you know, that there was a couple other things that were important. Would they, I'm reading it, they'd have to come back to council because they can just concentrate on that one thing? Basically, that's what it says here.
I'll direct that to you, Chris, for a response to that.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor. So, I mean, I think it's fair the way the way you've characterized it. And the purpose of it is really to manage scope creep on behalf of the committee and to make sure that council is always aware and endorses the questions and the work that the committee is doing. So it's not meant to make it more laborious, but if you were to set up a recreation committee and provide it with some very specific issues or questions to answer to inform decision-making around the council table, and that may be on a specific item or just to inform, you know, priorities that go into a budget or a recreation master plan, whatever it may be, it wouldn't preclude them from coming and saying, we've identified these other things, we'd like to put these forward for further study by the committee. What we would like to do is see a process where instead of them just doing that, they actually bring that back to council and say, are these things you wish for us to look at now and to provide advice on to council? And if council decides that, yes, you know, those are things that are of interest to us and that those are things we want study and advice on, then you would just add that to their terms of reference or their scope. And I think that's a way of ensuring that what we heard before, you'll recall, councillor, is that some committees just either didn't have clear enough direction from council, or even where they did, they decided to go off in their own directions, which you know, creates tension and sometimes frustration because the committee says, why isn't council paying attention to these things we are saying important? It's because, you know, either council didn't give the clear instruction and or council for them, those weren't really the things they needed noodled on and advice on to address. So we just want to make sure that there's that locking mechanism, that liaison mechanism, to make sure that there isn't scope creep that begins to work against the purposes of committee and trying to advance priorities as established by council.
So I'd like to add a question on to Councillor Kennedy's, if I may. It didn't comment in any of the recommendations about the difference between a committee or a working group or the volunteers that do great work in our community. For instance, there's folks up in many subdivisions that look after an ice pad for the winter, or they mulch around trees, or they do all sorts of things. And is the volunteer group that the volunteer people that live in our community, is that a whole different structure and function than what you are addressing in this report, Chris?
I would say it is, Your Worship. Like if it's an informal group that comes together through kind of their own volition to do certain things, like build an outdoor rink and maintain it, things of those nature, then they're not formally caught within the governance structure, unless you were to say, we are going to make you a committee, or we're going to make you a working group that we have some level of oversight and or direct support to do those activities. So they do fall outside of what we looked at, up and until you decide you want to formalize it as part of governance and make it a thing over which council has more direct say and oversight on.
Other questions? Councillor Steinhoff, Gray, Councillor Pranger, and Councillor Stewart.
Through you, Chair. One of the questions I was going to ask about, I really do like the idea of the temporary, ad hoc, and working groups, but one of the things that stuck with me was the reference that the only permanent group, because every other one would be temporary by nature, was those that are statutory. And I wasn't sure how many of our committees, like I don't believe environment statutory, but are things that I just don't see going away, where the space is for those items that don't fall under a stat, that should be long-term and not temporary by nature.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we are recommending that you are setting the what I'll call the discretionary or the non-statutory committees up on an ad hoc basis with very clear and focused terms of reference. That wouldn't stop you from us. So there's nothing in our recommendations that would stop you from telling us we also want to make room to have standing committees or more permanent committees. That's some of the feedback we want. But we heard from discussions with yourselves and looking at it, there was a real strong appetite, and hence the recommendation to have committees that are time limited, really focused, and that get work done, as opposed to are maybe given too general a mandate and are always and again worrying about that scope creep that eventually means they're doing stuff that isn't supporting priorities at the council table, and or they are actually undertaking things that are creating unnecessary work, and or things that are just quite frankly contrary to where council may want to go. So even in the ad hoc structure, you can keep a committee focused on environment going over the course of council. In what case, what becomes ad hoc is what their specific scope, what their specific terms of reference and or scope of study and or advice is. And we would, so you could have a committee for 4 years, but we would encourage you to be constantly, once one work package is done by the committee, then having a discussion with the chair of that committee or whatever, and figuring out what the next scope is going to be. Always being mindful of how are we tasking this committee to help us execute our priorities, or quite frankly, how are we tasking this committee to inform our priorities? Because there may be things that were not on our radar today that, as the committee does its study to the previous councillor's question, may come up. And again, it's communicating that back to the council table, and council saying, yeah, we think that's worth looking at, and we want you to come back with your findings and your advice within a time frame on certain specific questions related to those issues that they identified.
Councillor Pranger, and then Stewart. Yep.
Thank you through the chair. I wanted to express my sincere gratitude for this report. I will admit, and I apologize for this process based on some of the questions and my lack of understanding of exactly where we were going with it. I was not expecting this, and I am thrilled to see this. So thank you so much. I actually really like, I think, every single recommendation you have here. I have not read one that I don't like. And to Councillor Steinhoff's question, the way I read the definitions of the different types of committees, the environment committee, for example, that she used, to me, that would be, we could fit that into the working group committee. And maybe I'm wrong, so you could correct me if that's not it. However, I do like your suggestion that maybe we have a proviso that, or add in the fact that we can have standing committees still if we want. I don't know whether that's a required addition to the definitions, or if it could fit into working groups. But that was my read of it. That's something that was a little more ongoing, long-term. Scope could change if we want, because it could come back to council. That would fit in the working group. So if I'm wrong there, you can correct me, please. But again,
No, you're correct. You're correct, Councillor. There's nothing here that limits your ability, but if you want us to be more explicit about, we can, and I would encourage you to use, criteria to say, when do we establish a, kind of more permanent committee versus an ad hoc, but the principles would still apply, but you're absolutely right.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes. My personality, the way you've outlined this report and the definitions and our recommendations, very palatable to me and my understanding. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. You did a good job, Chris. It's a lot of information to take in. And to be honest with you, the one thing that was lacking through your process, we should have had a couple of work sessions with just the councillors. I know you individually interviewed us, and you've had also work sessions with the staff, and I believe the mayor and also the CEO, but we really haven't worked together to really understand, because I look at this year, it's going to be a hybrid sort of type of model as we migrate into this. I'm not even sure timelines and everything else. I like the overall structure. Certain things we can migrate fairly quickly. Twice a month meetings, I really like that idea. Extending it out from Monday to Wednesday gives us more idea, because prime example here, Chris, is we got this Thursday night and I read it twice and I still have lots of questions.
Yeah.
Just wanted to ask you one. You had reference number, or you recommended 14 to 16. That doesn't seem to be even on the page. So between 14 and 16, there's no recommendations. That's just observation. What I would recommend, and I'm not sure if we can do this, but I think we need to have a little time with this. We need to work with the staff, the CEO, and maybe even you, that allows us to ask some additional questions. And I'm not sure if Chris is still available this week to ask questions, because tonight's a little bit going to be long and I don't really want to go, but I think this is so important that the council needs to have a little more time. And I know it's just information, but if you're available, Chris, or through our CAO, we can continue on asking questions and start working out the framework to migrate towards this model. Thank you.
So happy to, Councillor. Again, you guys have to be comfortable with it, because at the end of the day, it'll be with you to operationalize and to make it successful. The recommendations 14 through 16, Councillor, are in the more detailed final report. They were just things around some updates based on current leading practice around staff council relations and the council code of conduct. For the purposes of brevity, we didn't put them here, but they are detailed in the more detailed draft final report.
Thanks, Chris.
So I'd like to defer to our CAO, and part of the motion talks about the final report. And I haven't forgot to Councillor Hinchberger. I'll come back. But just if you could comment on, what the timeline is for the final report, or how, as Councillor Stewart, how do we set the priorities and what do we integrate first, and those sorts of things. If you could speak to that, please.
Sure, and I do want to thank council and strategy core because we were looking at a very short time frame originally as a turnaround. And once we got into the process, we realized we needed a little bit more time and we really did want to do that touch base with council, which is why it wasn't originally planned, but why it was important to us to bring back the findings to make sure that that assessment through the interviews and the working group with the staff and the mayor was something that council also felt and understood as part of the process. So that touch point was really an important thing to make sure that council was on board with what it was that had been uncovered through the process. And even this, adding this additional, okay, this is the final report as drafted, is another touch point that originally we probably weren't planning in terms of the overall scope. We were looking at short timeframes. Let's get this done. Let's do this review. But throughout the process decided, no, we need to make sure we've got that time. So that's part of the point of having this again this evening, is making sure that we've captured what it is that council would like to see for themselves as governing for the municipality. And if I could, Mayor, I would just also offer, I'm just going ahead, for working groups and versus standing committees, there is also a benefit, in my opinion, in my experience, for people from the community that want to come and participate. Sometimes they don't want to be on a committee for an entire 4-year term. They would prefer to be on a focused issue. And if there's something that comes back as a similar related issue, they might be interested in following that up, but sometimes they're done after they're done. And we really appreciate their volunteerism, but there are times where being on something for that long, hopefully you don't feel that way as council members, but a 4-year term sometimes is not what engages the community. It's a bit too long for their preference. So it just as a little bit of feedback there.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you through you, Mayor, and thank you, Chris, for the report. There's a lot in here that I like, and in general, with some minor exceptions, I can work with this. You took some of the words out of my mouth related to committees, and I think the view I'd like to give to our councils is that committees are issue-based. And that's why on an ad hoc nature, issues are going to come and go. And especially if you consider like environment, the number of issues that we might put to a committee can be very wide-ranging and require a different set of skills in order to solve each of them. So in a sense, you could have an environment committee in perpetuity, but it would be ad hoc on a specific issue, and then you would change out in accordance with the next issue and problem you want to solve. Thanks.
Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you. One of the questions I had was on page 32. It looks at the procedural bylaw and recommends some potential changes. Is that the only changes that will come from the procedural bylaw, or will it also look to potentially reorganize some of the ways that we structure our meetings, the order of things, the things that currently are on the committee of the whole agendas, but are not on the council agendas?
Yeah, so in X deliverable council is a top to bottom review and an updated draft procedural bylaw for consideration by council. So we'll be looking at all those elements in addition to the specific things we identified as part of the governance review to change.
Follow up, Councillor Blackwell. Councillor Steinhoff Gray, then please.
Through you, Chair. So just to clarify, because I was actually thinking about that, but I wasn't going to ask it. So like, for example, with our consent items, a lot of times we view those on the committee of a whole, and then we ask for those items to be pulled. So they would become part of the normal agenda as opposed to a separate item.
Well, or you can still have a consent agenda at a council meeting.
Councillor Blackwell and then Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. I wanted to touch a little bit on the some of the findings around committees that we have in the past when you did the snapshot of kind of where we are currently and where we're going. And one of the elements is, to my knowledge, I think we're working on it, is we don't currently have a volunteer program. So for those people that are not fitting under the existing committee structure as it proposed in this report, could you speak a little bit about how you see us being able to support them going forward? And that may be a question for the CAO, I am not sure.
Let's start with our CAO and see if Chris has some comments, how it fits into this governance review, please.
So I would offer that I've seen in other municipalities, and I think a little bit of what I've seen with committee structures here is some of the reason why committees of council became formed had more to do with insurance and making sure there was insurance for those members who are doing good work and volunteering in the community. So if there's a tweak, adjustment, a shift, we still want to make sure that those individuals are captured with insurance. And that's what I'm working on as well with a draft volunteer policy, a couple of examples. So we've actually spent more time than I expected on looking at this and trying to think it through and walk through it, and still looking for advice from some of those volunteer groups, some that I think are here this evening, which is great. But I've had an opportunity to speak to at least one who, you know, we walked through it, sat down, had a good meeting, and even through that have decided we're going to tweak and adjust to make it clearer. So I want to make sure that any changes that potentially could happen out of this governance review don't result in there being other people left out when we want that good work to continue.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. And through you, Chris, it gets very technical, and, you know, I'd like to have a workshop on this, because when we start talking about setting up committees, whether it's a standing committee, ad hoc, or a group thing, it's got to be through a motion. And then approved by council. But does the term of reference need to be part of that motion? Because it's a real specialty to really understand your term of references. And then the selection committee has to sort of pick the people on those I mean, that whole process is really key to make this thing successful. Can you maybe sort of answer some of the pitfalls or some of the successes?
Yeah, so in the appendices, we outlined a more detailed procedure, Councillor. One is, you know, when council feels, so, you know, the procedural bylaw would, you know, have a set of criteria that you'd use to determine, you know, if it's a committee thing or if it should be something else. If it's determined it's a committee thing, council would make a motion to have staff go back and say, you know, council wishes to establish this committee. Staff are to come back with recommendations on terms of reference. And then that would be brought back as a report for then council to endorse. So we're asking you, you know, for the terms of reference, to give staff some time to appropriately craft that based on broad direction provided by council. And then, you know, once that is established, then the striking committee would draw, and the big difference we're proposing now is a continuous intake of folks who may be interested in serving on a committee, and a little bit more detail in the quote unquote application that they provide. So we have a better sense of the skills and interests and knowledge and experience that they bring to the table. And so with that terms of reference, the striking committee can then draw from that general pool to populate it with the right folks needed to do the work of that committee. And so you're right. I mean, it is a little bit more refined than the current process is now. We try to outline those steps, and that's going to be really critical, again, to making sure you're setting up the committees for the right purposes with the right questions and the right skills and expertise around that table, or the right representation, because representativeness is still an important criterion, I would argue, in terms of filling out committees in order to provide council with the advice they're looking for on a specific issue or a specific subject matter.
Thanks, Chris.
Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Thanks for calling on me again. Through the chair, the one last thing that I wanted to just touch on quickly was probably one of biggest recommendations I'm seeing in the report is the elimination of committee of the whole. And earlier in the first report, we had a reference that it was a forum for public participation, sober second thought, and additional dialogue. And I'm just curious how you see eliminating it, how those kind of elements can still be captured and allow us to have those dialogues around the table where we may find information out from each other that we didn't consider before making decisions.
It's a really good question. So at the time we did the current state, we weren't yet sold on the need to move away from committee of the whole. And then subsequently, when we looked at it in looking at the combination of the recommendations around, you know, how to better use advisory committees of council, the different ways in which the municipality consults outside of the formal council chambers, that kind of led us, and then just, you know, the sheer volume you guys are dealing with in terms of meetings and the pace of meetings and things of that nature, it led us to conclude that committee of the whole really wasn't adding a whole lot of value, and that moving to this revised structure will allow for greater transparency, more points of input for the public, and also allowing you the time and the space to understand public perspectives, and also to consume your materials in a way that allows you to make decisions around the council table. It would be a better approach than maintaining committee of the whole for the sake of maintaining committee of the whole. We've also recommend updates to the report, you know, the reporting templates that staff use to write reports to council, which includes an explicit section on stakeholder, both, you know, kind of where stakeholders are on this, which stakeholders have been consulted, but also then what the communications potential or rollout needs of a particular matter may be. I think that's an additional way to ensure that you know, stakeholder perspectives are being brought to bear around the council table, and you're making decisions with the benefit of understanding those perspectives.
So if I might clarify, please, Chris, at this point in time, we already only do have 2 council meetings a month. Right. We have a third meeting each month that's called a planning meeting.
Yep.
So are you suggesting that we divest ourselves of that planning meeting so that there's only actually 2 physical times that we come together as council? Or is there some, you know,
yeah,
from this report, you're not asking us to change anything, really, unless you're
No,
asking
no,
us to change the planning meeting time frame. Is what was your intent, or what was the thought behind that, please?
Yeah, I guess, Your Worship, we're asking you to do away with committee of the whole, which you're in now, embedded inside inside a regular council meeting. So we're not asking you to do any, there's not a change in frequency of meetings, but there is a change in the type of meeting and the focus of that meeting. We didn't really change, we didn't make any recommendations around the planning meeting. You know, so we're not recommending that you change that either. And you know,
so if I may interject, just as a suggestion,
yeah,
it is quite possible that we could have 2 council meetings per month, 2 times that we come together, and included, instead of committee of the whole, you have a council meeting where you have the in-depth conversations. You might only choose to have first and second reading if it's an issue that, you know, we need a little more input on this one. We'll give it first and second. It's the intent, we're heading there, and pass it 2 weeks later.
Correct.
But it could be that we might address planning issues, which include, you know, committee of adjustment, planning, but it's also strategic planning. It's also the dreaming for recreational facilities. It's the conversations, like that's all planning too. That's like, it's not land planning conversations, but it's municipal planning, which is entirely valuable. So it could be that we have council planning, council and planning at 2 meetings each month. Like, you know, the first and the third or second and fourth month or week, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we'll do it every time. Do it every time so that there's, you know, actually our planning, our ability to accommodate planning issues increases rather than slowing it down. So I just wanted to make council aware that, you know, the change that is recommended isn't a change really. It's just rather than having council and committee of the whole, we just have council.
Correct.
But in between, there's that planning meeting, which really doesn't change our desire. And I appreciate the you know, the outcome of this is that staff, what's the expression? You gotta feed the meeting beast or something like that. Like you got to keep generating reports. You got to keep throwing stuff into the incinerator to burn it up. And now they've got time in between to research and craft and do all those things that are so valuable to us when we come to make decisions. So I acknowledge that like it's my desire to present to get this presented so that the final draft can be presented to us. But like there are a number of issues as councillors Stewart and Steinhoff, others have commented. There's some questions here.
Yep.
So I want the final draft to come back. I want to make the changes, but I don't want to hold it up. But we have to have the conversation. Where is that? How does our CAO envision? This is the first conversation. I see another conversation between now and the final report. Because I need to see, I need to hear from our staff, you know, this is how we're going to implement it. This is what it's going to look like. Can you comment on that, please, Jolene, for that?
Certainly through you. I think I would say that the direction through recommendations that get approved by council, at what point council decides they're satisfied with the final report. The implementation of it is definitely a phased approach. There's a lot of different aspects of what's in even this report that will take some time. So it isn't everything everywhere all at once. Well, we will need to take a little bit of time to bring back aspects of it. And at those times, like the procedure bylaw is not a simple task. The procedure bylaw is a pretty significant overhaul and change, which will be really the first thing that we will want to bring forward as here's how you're going to implement this, but that is not something that will be without discussion. That certainly requires council's feedback and, you know, may require more than one iteration. But in terms of an additional time with strategy core for another session, we haven't planned that at this phase. This really was meant to be, let's make sure you've got your, you know, thoughts and input for council. But if that's not the direction council wants to take tonight before our final report is presented, I think we just need that direction.
So there have been many reports presented to many governments with many recommendations. And I think what I just heard you say was, you know, as just for instance, next month you say, we need a motion to amend the procedure bylaw, bring back a draft report. So in that will be the recommendations and some of them, the ones included in that. And before we approve any of these, there will be robust discussion around our table to have that conversation. So what we are approving are the recommendations, but how we implement them and the timing is another discussion and decision-making process phased in down the road. Okay. Councillor Hinchberger and Blackwell, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. As long as it's the forum to ask questions, I realized I made an assumption that was incorrect, and I assumed that the Planning Corporate Services meeting was somehow being absorbed, and that in effect, we were going to end up with 2 meetings per month in chambers. So realizing that that wasn't the case now, I think my question is, what barriers would prevent us from absorbing Planning Corporate Services into council meetings such that we only meet 2 times a month? Because I imagine the beast, there is some aspect of the beast that occurs just by having to go through the workflow for each meeting. And if you might be able to eliminate going through that workflow once a month, there's something to be gained, but I'm not involved in the process. I'm a little confused though.
To our legislative whiz over here. Is there, is there any legislative reason why we cannot have a council and a planning meeting at each time we gather together?
Through you, no, there is no reason why we can't do that. I would only say that you'll notice some of the recommendations in there are also to provide more delegations to staff. And so maybe the types of reports that are actually coming to this council table are not the same, because as you can see, we have 3 meetings a month, and they're 3 really large meetings a month because we have a lot of items on there. And so it might be streamlining those items that we put on council agendas. It might be getting that information from you beforehand so that we can answer a lot of these questions before we get to the council table. So if we want to keep that same time, and we are just going to do it twice a month, we have to look at making a leaner machine sitting around this table as well. Through process, as indicated by Councillor Hinchberger, yes, from our process, from a workflow process, it would streamline for us that we're only doing it twice a month. But again, it's around this table as well that we need to streamline and make sure that we get those fulsome conversations in the entire, when the meetings don't go to midnight.
Yeah, so we have to move a little farther up the governance chain. So we won't be in the weeds, we'll be cutting the grass even taller. Like there will have to be authority delegated to staff for some issues that there just isn't time to cover, because I have no interest, I don't believe you do, as our clerk said, to be here till midnight. That's an awful thing. Councillor Prenger, Stewart, and Blackwell. I'm sorry, I skipped over them.
Sorry, did you want to go back? Okay, thank you, Chair. Sorry, and to follow up on what our clerk just said, I believe there are some recommendations in there, if I'm remembering correctly, that address exactly what you just said. Having the conversations beforehand, making sure questions are answered the day before and that kind of stuff so that we could do this. And I think that would facilitate that. So that's one of the reasons why I really liked, even though there's so many recommendations, the fulsome set of recommendations, because it addresses the steps we need to take in order to get to the main changes we want to make.
Councillor Stewart, please.
I agree. Exactly. Just moving the meeting from a Monday to a Wednesday allows those extra 2 days that as council will be asking a lot more questions, so we'll be better prepared. And, because it is tough over the weekends. A lot of times if you're away for the weekend and all of a sudden we're firing at staff Monday morning while they're trying to get ready. So having those 2 extra days, I think that's important for initial. If we're going to implement something, I really like that. And I think we could easily do a 2-day meeting every month if we do that. Thank you.
Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you. Through you. That was actually going to be my question, was knowing that we are going to be doing a very robust changes. Is it possible to bring forward a small amendment to our existing procedural bylaw to move the meetings to Wednesday, leaving all other things in place, to at least give us that time to test out whether it will be possible for us to do 2 meetings a month by trying to shorten the ones we've got now?
Response, CAO, Brown?
Sure, and maybe I will just ask the clerk for a little bit of clarification around, just so everybody's on the same page with respect to the 2 meetings a month, because it will go to the answer to your question about whether or not we could be putting forward an agenda package while we haven't finished the previous meeting. So maybe just want to clarify so we're all on the same page about the 2 meetings a month.
Sorry, through you. Yes, the recommendation is just to have 2 meetings a month. So there would be a meeting on the first week, a meeting on the third week, There would be no meeting. You would not be sitting around this table at that middle meeting. So we'd be able to push planning reports to the either one of those two meetings. So that we would be able to do all of the business in 2 nights as opposed to 3 nights.
And as Councillor Stewart has commented, that's the summer schedule anyway. That is the summer schedule. It's not exactly, yeah, we do them back to back, but there's only 2 meetings.
No, yeah. But I will.
Do you have a follow-up question, Councillor Blackwell? You can if you want to.
Well, thank you through you. I think that Jill may address it, but my question was more around currently we're meeting on Monday nights. One of the recommendations was to try and give us a couple more days with the meeting package, which means we would meet Wednesday and the new meeting package would come out Thursday, regardless of how many meetings a month. I'm just not sure if that quick change would really.
How fast can we
help.
switch to the procedural bylaw to go to Wednesday evenings? That's the question, I think.
Yes.
So I would not recommend just amending our current procedure bylaw to do that. So that I think was the question, because I think you do want to move to a schedule that is as, like, we want to confirm that's the schedule you want to have. Because if we move to a different night and the package is coming out, I don't think we've got the capacity internally to move all of those reports within that time frame to get it out to you that week. I just don't think we could possibly do it if you keep 3 meetings a month and just amend the procedure bylaw to change the meeting date. I don't think it's possible.
It's the quick turnaround from have the meeting Wednesday, the reports go out Thursday. Very challenging. Yeah, Councillor Stewart, and this will be the last, and then I'm going to call the question, okay?
Yeah, and the good thing is that we have the summer with 2 meetings. So if we're going to start to do something like this, it gives everybody a break during the summer. It gives council a break, gives staff a break. We catch up on a lot of things. You'll be very surprised how the council meetings go during the summer. They last about an hour. You know, unless there's a big planning meeting and everything else. And I understand if we do have big planning, we might have to have them on the 1st and the 3rd. But I think that for now, just keep things status quo and work through the summer and then maybe start to really implement during the fall. It'd be the easiest for us. Thank you.
So we have a motion on the floor. Moved and seconded? Moved and seconded. That council receive the governance review draft report and further that council direct staff to bring back the final report for council's consideration. So that we're considering this draft report regarding the recommendations. And you know, following that, staff will advise us how we begin to implement it over a period. Okay. All in favor of that recommendation? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you, council. That's good conversation. We have a report from our treasurer, director of finances, regarding an indemnification bylaw and the may we hear the motion, please?
This is moved by Beth Blackwell, seconded by Bill Stewart, that staff report financial services 2023-14 enactment of indemnification bylaw be received and that council adopt the indemnification bylaw as drafted.
It could be that you don't have to say anything. You can just direct me to call the vote if you would like. You've heard the motion. Are there any questions? All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Well presented.
That's the best presentation I've had on. I hope that wasn't the only reason we're here.
No. We also have our director here regarding our budget policy. Clerk, the motion for that resolution, please.
Moved by Jennifer Pranger, seconded by Mike Hinchberger, that at its May 15th, 2023 meeting, council adopts the draft budget policy as presented or with amendments, and that once the new budget policy is adopted, council repeals the former policy GG 2.7 budget process, and further that council repeals GG 2.14 municipal financial policy.
Director, please.
Okay, so through you, during the budget process this year, the staff had heard some feedback from council in terms of how the process unfolded. And in our review of the Municipality of Kincardine Policy Manual, this policy has somehow made its way to the top of the list for policies to be reviewed. We do have currently two older policies that were attached for your review. They had not been updated since, I think one of them was 1999 and the other one was last updated in 2007. Those were more kind of procedural internal documents. And therefore we're requesting to repeal those upon approval of this new policy. Many of the, I guess, the processes that are documented and outlined in this policy are actually already in place. They were just not formalized or documented in a formal process document. So while staff did have a lot of these processes in place, this just kind of formalizes the framework and provides some clarity over the process. So staff is requesting that at the May 15th meeting that this policy be adopted with any amendments being recommended by council.
So that is kind of an invitation to ask questions, knowing that the policy itself will not be presented for final reading until our council meeting on May 15, 2 weeks from now. Are there any questions or comments regarding the proposed draft budget policy? Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. As probably one of those who provided feedback during the budget process, I really appreciate this. I talked to CAO about some of these things this afternoon, and I understand that the framework that was added to the agenda subsequent to initially will form part of the policy, and that gives the timeline for the various steps. I like that as well. I have some just general feedback about the priority ranking scheme in there about, for instance, it's that I'll feedback offline, but I'll just generalize a few of the things here right now. It should be when you get past high, which was like mandatory type stuff. If you looked at things like any projects coming through related to the waterfront master plan, they look to me that they would only fall into the low category. And I have some questions about that. And the other one is we have a medium priority given to projects that gives some sort of operating and maintenance payback in 5 years or less. And I think maybe I would suggest a provision that would give something that has a payback in an order of like a year or less, get a high priority. I'll save some of the comments for some of my other councillors, but overall, I'm over the moon at this. Thanks.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. I'm like Councillor Hitchberger. I don't want to get too much into it, but one of the things I sort of noticed under around 4.1 council, and I thank you, you sent the flow chart. I went through it quickly and I haven't gone through it enough yet. And I'll be giving you comments, so don't worry about it. I'll talk to you during the week. But I think it's important for council to give strategic initiatives or strategic before they even start doing the draft, because that's what we're going to vote on. So somehow in the flow chart that we're going to, we have 3 initiatives this year. We need to actually create the initiatives for next year prior to your draft. So we can sort of tell you directionally where we'd like to spend some of the money. Does everyone sort of understand that? And, because we're talking about doing a 4-year strategic plan, and I won't get into it tonight, but I'll talk to you individually. The other thing.
Councillor Stewart, good point. I just want to kind of clarify it with our director. We identified 3 areas at our strategic planning the other evening, 2, 5, and 14, where they, so whatever the numbers were, I think they were. When you're crafting, when you're beginning to draft your budget, is it staff's intent to, as Councillor Hinchberger said, to like those are the focus areas? Like I think I heard you say, we need to establish them in November before. But your draft starts way before that. Your draft starts in July and August. So I'm wondering if those are the 3 areas that, as you're going through your priority setting, your budget presentations, are those the areas, acknowledging that all the areas are important, but these were the 3 that were most important. Are those the three that you have identified from council as being strategically important? Is that the mindset that you take into that process? Just for clarity here. Rather than establishing three others in November, and that's too late.
We need to establish, because I don't want them to start wandering around. It'll be better, tighter and more focused, because we'll be going, we like that, and there's a reason behind it. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. I think this conversation just highlights the importance of how we need a long-term strategic plan, because if you're just kind of muddling through each year, it's really hard for the municipality to plan and especially to budget for the long term. So I think you're correct that these business plans that we put forward in the budget itself, they all have to mirror what the strategic plan's goals are, and we can't provide a guiding document through this budget process without that. So it's difficult for me to answer other than to say that a long-term strategic plan is important, and that's what staff will be working towards when we develop our long-term budgets.
Follow up, Councillor Stewart, please.
Yeah, the other thing is, it's always been my bugaboo, and you know it, and I'm sorry to tell you about it, but I'm going to talk about it again. 5.44. As per reserve and reserve fund policy, we do an annual audit, and we usually put the surplus or the deficit. We're not allowed to have a deficit, but the surplus usually goes in the capital contingency reserve. I like to set up a new reserve if it's a surplus. Maybe call it a tax migration, that we sort of understand where that extra, if it's surplus. And I'm not sure if that's possible, but that's just one of the wishes that I sort of had. And another thing is 5.5.2 I think it is, or L. When we start talking about the projects and we talked about sort of the format of the projects, the capital projects, we do estimates. What I like to see in those estimates is who actually provided us the estimate, like the name of the company. Is that possible, or how do we do all the estimates in the capital projects?
So through you, I don't think that that's something that staff would recommend. And we don't always necessarily go out to receive an informal quotation. I think a lot of those estimates are developed internally through discussion with other staff and their previous experience, or even discussions with other municipalities in terms of what is the costs that have been incurred for certain work. I think that would be very difficult to put into a project sheet as to who actually provided that quote.
Well, that's important. I never knew that. So that was important. So I agree with you. If we don't do it now, because I always thought we went out and got cost estimates. So if that's an internal thing, I'd leave it the way it is. So I'll take away that comment completely.
Sorry, was there a question down this side? Councillor Steinhoff, great, please.
Through you, Chair. I was actually just going to say, I really do enjoy section 5.5.2. Where it goes over the capital budget and what the forecast needs to include, because that's really all the information we need to make an informed decision. I was just curious if your software allowed you to track that. That feels like a very manual intensive process for each project. So I wasn't sure if that was something that we had software that it would be ingested by to put out our reports or not. I was just going to ask the question.
So through you, Chair. Yes, so for the individual project sheets, if you'll remember, each capital project was accompanied by a justification for each project. And so, yes, we can go in and modify all of the attributes. It's a fairly new system, so we haven't had the opportunity to be able to make those enhancements so far. But yes, we can definitely include these attributes.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. It's a kind of a follow-up to Councillor Stewart's question, but in a completely depersonalized way. Do we employ, like in our estimating process, like the concept of different quality of estimates based on the value of a project, like plus or minus? You know, when we get big, we really want to, like, you know, a tight margin, and I think that's the going at Councillor Stewart's at a different way. I'm not so much concerned with who performed it. It's more important to me about, if I'm looking at a number, I generally know that there's a plus or minus on all of those. So that's my question. Like, do we do that? And if we do, could that be just incorporated in there in terms of, you know, what am I looking at? Plus 10%, minus 50, that sort of thing in there? Thanks.
Through you. I think for the larger scale construction type projects that we receive engineering advice on in terms of quantifying the projects, they would have a built-in contingency for that. Whether it's 10 or 20%, I am not sure. But for other smaller scale projects, I would think it's more just an ad hoc estimate. I don't know how much detail can be provided for that.
No, that's good. Thank you for the answer. And I agree for the low scale ones, but is it possible for the larger ones, we could put in what the estimated contingency is as well? Because it helps identify the buffer. Okay.
And that actually might be a really good question in that procurement session, just because we don't go out to do this exactly the same way, and whether or not there are any limitations associated with doing that in the public sector. I don't know. I would have to think about that, but it's a very good point.
Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you, I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding 5.4.2, which is speaking around the one-time revenues or including those from reserves, that it's not to be used on ongoing operating expenditures. I think that's something that many of us around the table indicated that was our philosophy. I'm just making sure it's so baked in here. I'm just not sure if that gives council the flexibility they may need, despite it being best practice.
Through you.
I'm not sure I heard the question. Was there a question?
Oh, yeah, I'm just wondering. I guess it's more of a question to council is, do we want that to be so baked into a policy that it binds future councils who may not share our same philosophy? I'm not sure.
I think that's a policy question for our CAO and not so much from from our director. So it's our policy. Like if the next council doesn't like that policy, then they can change it. So it's as long as our council chooses to follow that path, then we will do that. And if the next council doesn't like it, then they will choose to do something different. So it's binding for the short term. Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, I really appreciate this. It almost guarantees that we're going to have a better budgeting cycle this time around than the previous one. The only thing I'd like to see is more of the budgeting for outcomes incorporated into it going forward, but that's something that I'll reach out and address later on. The second thing I'd like to make a motion for is an extension for the meeting to extend no later than 8:30 to resolve the remaining agenda items.
So does that supersede the motion that's on the floor already? Because we have one regarding budget policy.
Yeah, if we only have like 2 minutes left, council will be done.
No, I mean, does Rory's motion supersede the motion?
Yes,
It
they
does?
can.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor that we extend till 8:30. We need a seconder for that motion. Councillor Hinchberger, discussion. Is 8:30 long enough?
If it is not, then you can make another motion.
All in favor of the motion? That's carried. Okay. Are there any other questions for our Director of Finance? Councillor Blackwell, did you have one that you wanted to address again? Deputy Mayor Clark, please.
I just want to say, this is definitely a job well done. Having read through this, it has certainly given a degree of confidence. I think I echo perhaps what Councillor Kavanagh was saying about the budget process going forward. So thank you very much. Really well done.
All in favor of the motion? Anyone opposed? That's carried. We're doing the next one.
If I can be brief.
D, yeah. Okay, we have a resolution regarding disposition of municipal lands. Clerk, please.
This is moved by Andrea Clark, seconded by Amanda Steinhoff Gray, that council view the public property between 207 and 209 Birchwood Ave during the roads and facilities bus tour with staff prior to consideration of potential declaration of surplus and disposition.
CAO, please.
I will endeavor to be very brief. So the report does outline what the process is with declaration and for disposition of surplus land. So quick notes on what that process is. But really the crux of it is, I know that there have been members who have attended the site. There's been some discussion in general about this, but and we had intended for Birchwood Path to be a part of the winter roads and facilities tour. We didn't make it there. We got a little bit stuck in one little location. Yeah, a little bit. So we do have this on the tour map as an item, and I think it would be beneficial for everybody to be together, and then we bring it back if there is a future decision to be made about this particular land.
Any other questions? All in favor of the motion? Might I direct council, this continues to be an issue that the residents are concerned of. They want to see some sort of resolution, but when the emails come in, direct them to our staff for, thank you for the email, but I'll forward this to our staff and they can respond to you, because that is where they continue to get the most concise type message. That's all right. County council update. Yes, we've had county council, but and I'll give you an update someday when we have more time. The consent agenda. Here are the are there any items on here that you would like to withdraw to either comment on or ask for inclusion in an upcoming agenda? And I acknowledge Councillor Stewart's email that there were some from another meeting that I'm not sure that they had got on the agenda. I'm going to confirm that with our CAO. They were from a previous council meeting. You had sent an email about that. So I'm going to confirm with our CAO and clerk about that. So are there any items from this consent agenda that you would like to consider? Councillor Steinhoff Gray, please.
Through you, Chair, I think that we have to look at the Kincardine naturalization projects, tree protection in the municipality of Kincardine letter submission, as there is a direct question asked of all of us in council, and I'm assuming many are tuning in to ensure that we've addressed it.
So that would be a request for a staff update or?
I think so.
See.
Sure. I think you're asking just to pull it on this agenda this evening to ask in response to the question, whether or not council wishes to deal with the question that was asked is up to council.
Who else? Councillor Stewart, you had your hand up, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just through you, Chair. Thank you very much. I'm interested in 8.5B. That's the expansion of the Kincardine water, but I see that we're going to incorporate it on the EA process perfectly, so we don't have to pull it. It's already been pulled. Thank you.
Councillor Hinchberger, you had a question?
No.
Anything else? All right. Adjournment. Clerk, please.
This is moved by Doug Kennedy, seconded by Beth Blackwell, that this committee of the whole adjourn at 8:04 p.m.
All in favor? That's carried. All right. So we have matters arising from committee of the whole. So we have Councillor Steinhoff Gray's request from the consent agenda, but we will do the consent agenda first. Is that how you would like to deal with that? Okay. Councillor Steinhoff Gray.
Sorry, I'm just opening the letter. If
Can you read that section, please, Counselor?
So the letter explicitly asks, we would ask that all members of council declare their position on tree protection, including a bylaw and official plan amendment, clearly in open session tonight, where we are now. Further, to demonstrate your commitment to your stated position, we ask that you direct staff to bring forward appropriate instruments as described in the attachment. So hopefully everyone's read it. Please note that the bylaw and report presented in October 2022 was not appropriate. Those of you who have read it will understand why. We are here as a resource and would be more happy to provide our input and expertise upon request. So I think what we're looking here is our affirmation of our support of tree protection, both including a bylaw as well as official plan, and then providing a request for the Kincardine naturalization projects to come and meet with us to discuss our path forward on this item.
So in consultation with our staff here, the tree bylaw is coming back to council next week. That would be the appropriate time to make the reference. I think from a procedural perspective, it is an unrealistic request at this time from that group, even though I understand their passion, and we all have a desire to enhance our environment, but to sit and respond to that is inappropriate without having received the tree bylaw and some guidance from our staff in a report like that too. So that would be my guidance for council at this point. Councillor Steinhoff Gray, please.
Respectfully, we've been waiting for a tree bylaw for quite some time, and I understand that this baton has been passed to us from the previous council. So I think they've been trying to be understanding with us. We're all 6 months in, and we haven't really got back to it yet. And that's just my honest opinion on it. And I think that if we are looking at the tree bylaw in its current state, which is not reflective of those recommendations of our environment committee, that we should at least invite them to be in attendance at the meeting where we discuss this and approach us with a delegation with the facts and findings they've put together to help us in this decision.
That's a very reasonable request to afford them that opportunity. So is that a possibility for our staff to connect with them and offer them the opportunity? Can we do that as a delegation to come and speak to a matter that's before council in that evening? You can't do it on a like the public forum, but how does that work procedurally as in regards to a motion that's coming forward? Can you answer that, clerk, please?
Through you, Chair. If there are groups that wish to delegate, they should put in a delegation request form, and they can say that they would like to delegate on this matter. I assume that staff's report will also include the recommendations that were made, and it will go through everything that happened with the previous council. So if there are groups that wish to delegate, then they should put a delegation request form in, and we can determine at that time and go forward from there.
So the time frame regarding that, they would need to submit that by tomorrow? Oh, no, not tomorrow. By what's the time frame for a submission?
Wednesday at noon.
Wednesday at noon. CAO, please.
Sure. I through you, Chair, I would also offer that there is going to be this policy / bylaw that comes back, because that was the direction from the previous council. It is entirely up to this council to decide whether or not they wish to adopt that bylaw, and they certainly don't have to do it the evening it's presented. So there is an opportunity for you to receive the information from staff based on what the direction was previously, and then invite other groups if they wish to come and speak to council prior to making any kind of a decision about it.
Councillor Hinchberger.
Thank you, through your Mayor. Personally, I'd just like to address that ask in the letter for myself personally. My position is I can't express it any better than they did. The need for, it's been often proposed that it's an either or. You build a whole bunch of houses or you protect the trees, and you can't do both. I don't buy that. So I agree with what they've written there. I anticipate there's going to be a flurry of activity come the agenda coming out on Thursday with whatever tree bylaw is on there and the accompanying staff report. So I think that we're all well motivated come Thursday afternoon to jump on this and do what we need to do.
Once again, with that flurry comes the recommendation that you may respond, but staff is much better equipped to answer those questions so that we don't get caught up in, I promise to do this or I promise to do that. Just caution you to moderate your words. That's all. Councillor Stewart and Councillor Prenger, please.
Thank you very much. Through you, there was a lot of excitement around this when it was brought to the table last term. And Councillor Kennedy and I believe Councillor Clark were all involved. And, we were going to pass something, but we really thought with the activity that we would defer it to the new council because there were some things that we wanted to change. So like the mayor is saying, there'll be lots of activity and we'll allow all the groups to talk about it. We don't have to make a decision right away. We can defer it, but we need to put this to bed as soon as possible and prior to probably the summer. Anyways, those are my comments and everything else because it brought a lot of interest and it's a very interesting policy and we might have to modify it or whatever, but it's really up to the 9 of us to make a decision. Thank you.
Councillor Prenger, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I won't repeat what Councillor Hinchberger said. I agree with him. And I am anticipating and excited to see what comes forward from staff with this proposed or new policy, because I have in the background been reviewing the original proposal and revisions since then, and I'd like to see. I'm excited to compare them and see what we get. And I agree, there's going to be quite a bit of discussion, I think. So
good discussion.
Thank you.
Productive discussion, right? CAO, please.
Thank you. Through you. I just want to be clear so there's no misunderstanding. We'll be following the direction that we received from council, which was to bring back the bylaw as it existed. So we are not crafting a new bylaw or a new policy. So don't expect there to be something different, which is why if you would like, it is the appropriate time to have the discussion about whether or not the policy still matches what it is you want, but don't be surprised when the agenda comes out.
That's what we asked for.
Thank you for clarifying, because I would have,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that, sorry.
Councillor Steinoff Gray, please.
I'm not sure if it's counterproductive, given we're already over time, so it's fine. I know that I'm not comfortable with it in its current format. I would like to see something stronger. So I'm just going on the record that I am not comfortable in its current format. So I think that having some delegations to help guide some of those decisions come forward would be a healthy exercise. And I'm happy to allow staff to respond back to the letter we received, understanding the guidance from my mayor that communication should be coming from our staff to see if they'd like to submit a delegation for Wednesday by noon. So I think my motion would be to reach out to the Kincardine Naturalization Project and make the offer that they submit a delegation. I think that would probably solve some of my concerns.
And I was just advised by our staff that we can encourage them to be a delegation, but if there's already 3 in line about something else, then I'm sorry, you don't get to hop the line for that. That's just the nature of the process. So we try to be fair. We try to listen to the voices. We might receive the bylaw and defer it until after we get the delegations another time. But we will have their voices here at the chamber. All right. So just a minute. I'm trying to find out where we're at. So was that a motion that was on the floor for them, or was that just anything?
I think we've said procedurally it's not possible. So
All right, so we're at disposition of consent agenda. Next page.
So we're.
Okay. So there was no motion attached to that. There was guidance from the chair that we just need to be careful, and we've given direction to staff about how we're going to receive. Staff has responded with what the draft will look like. And we are going, our staff will confirm if there is an application for a delegation, how it works. We'll receive the tree bylaw next council meeting, and we will go forward from there. Consent agenda, clerk, please.
Moved by Bill Stewart, seconded by Jennifer Prenger, that council approve the recommendations contained in the consent agenda dated May 1st, 2023, and direct staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions.
All in favor? That's carried. Governance review draft final report.
Moved by Mike Hinchberger, seconded by Andrea Clark, that council receive the governance review draft report, and further that council direct staff to bring back the report for council's consideration.
I've heard the resolution. Any more discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Indemnification bylaw, please.
Moved by Rory Kavanagh, seconded by Doug Kennedy, and that's the indemnification bylaw be deemed to be read first, second, third time. Finally passed and numbered as bylaw 2023-067.
Any more discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Disposition of municipal land.
Moved by Beth Blackwell, seconded by Bill Stewart, and that's that council view the property at 207, 209 Birchwood Ave during the road and facilities tour.
All in favor? That's any opposed? That's carried. All right, general announcements. Councillor Hinchberger. Councillor Prenger.
Sorry, no, none tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
I have to say that we do have a birthday girl here, and it's Councillor Clark, the deputy mayor. So happy birthday, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Blackwell, please. Councillor Kennedy.
Just to all those Leaf fans across Canada. All those blue sweaters that are gonna get sold in the next couple of weeks. It'll be, the ones that don't have them will have them.
Councillor Steinhoff Gray, please.
the only thing I would say is, again, I just want to flash back to the multicultural event that's happening on the 16th. I was really impressed with that delegation, and I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to engage with my community.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much. I just want to add congratulations to the Kincardine Family Health Team and the work that this council contributed to that. April Nichols, the new nurse practitioner, is starting today, and now we have 2 full-time nurse practitioners in Kincardine.
Extend our congratulations to Crystal and the family health team and all that are involved in that. Deputy Mayor, please.
No announcements.
Jolene.
I do just have one announcement. We did welcome a large number of our seasonal staff today, and I really want to thank Leanne for putting together a robust training session, an onboarding session to welcome them. She invited the mayor, myself, the director was available as well. I know they were learning from our fire prevention officer and other department heads. So full day of training, really nice to see those faces, new ones, and those that are returning, who really do serve to be ambassadors for our community because they do get the questions.
Ms. Gowing was training the next 25 faces of the municipality that'll be on tractors and doing the work for us this summer. All right, we have a motion to move into closed session. The council move into closed meeting for the purpose of considering litigation or potential litigation, including a matter before the Administrative Tribunal's Human Resources Legal matter. Advice that's subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for the purpose regarding Westerio update, and personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, candidates for BIA, and fence viewers, pursuant to Section 239 of the Municipal Act as amended, And further, the council return to regular open meeting upon completion. Moved by Jennifer Prenger and Councillor Hinchberger, all in favor?
Yes.
That's carried. Do we have to do automatic adjournment?